Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Tuesday Board of Supervisors meeting, and let's start out with a roll call, please.
Sorry, I'm not used to this.
No worries.
Okay, Supervisor Bohn?
Here.
Supervisor Bushnell?
Here.
Supervisor Wilson?
Present.
Supervisor Arroyo?
Here.
And Supervisor Madrone.
Present. And now, if you'll please all join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
if I could indulge you for a moment.
Please,
I have
Supervisor
something I
Bohn.
want to. It has been brought to my attention this weekend, I was an auctioneer at my 742nd auction, volunteer auctioneer, and said something that was inappropriate. I want to apologize, and for that, acknowledge it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bohn. So we'll go to the CAO. Are there any modifications to the agenda?
Yes, Chair Madrone, item D9 will be pulled for discussion, and item D10 will be modified to include in the record Exhibit A, which clarifies that the indemnification agreement between Mr. Geckmoeller and the Humboldt County Planning and Building Department applies to the property located at 12 Hawks Hill Road in Lolita, California, assessor parcel number 308-231-002.
Great. And no other modifications at this time?
That is all.
All right. So we have the consent agenda. Are there any comments, questions from the board? Seeing none, we'll go to the public, and we'll start with the Zoom folks. And Nikki, do you see any hands up?
I do, Chair Madrone. Caller 7454.
7454, you're up, and we've got 3 minutes for all comments today. And also, if you are watching with the video feed, you should turn the audio off because there is a delay and you could miss your chance to speak. But at this point, we have 7454.
Well, what was Rex apologizing for? I didn't get the details. I guess maybe I'll have to have someone get a hold of him later. Anyway, I did wish to make comment on item D2 on your consent. I kind of always keep track of, the money spent traveling, for mileage on these things as far as your expenses go. First district, I think, was $645.65, kind of an anomaly. The second district was $1,140.67, zero in 3 and 4, and $207.50 in 5. So the public does watch, how the money's being spent. I'm sure it's being done for good causes. It's kind of a little bit ambiguous. It kind of says it's been done for meetings strictly on the thing when it's submitted there. And so it's kind of hard for us to tell what meetings and why we have anomalies there. I did wish to mention on item number 3 that Michael Fields, I was going to use reverse psychology. He says he has too much common sense, too many people skills, too much understanding of financial issues, so you shouldn't appoint him. That would be reverse psychology. But Michael's fantastic. We're lucky to have him. I have conversations with Michael probably every other Sunday at his work establishment down there. Great person, and of course for all the people who take their time on these committees, that's always greatly appreciated. I did have a comment. Maybe was item 10 pulled, or was there just a change in it there? Anyway, I'm going to make a comment. If that's inappropriate, I'd be corrected. There seems to be a tendency now, and this is the first one I've heard of, to engage in indemnification clauses if somebody's threatening litigation to the county, if a lawyer's involved or something. And I don't know if this is a precedent that you want to have set where people can go ahead and force this to happen. As far as applicants go, this is a different process. It's been common in cannabis. First time I've heard of a non-cannabis indemnification. So is this a trend to acquiesce to lawyers, or what's going on here? I thank you for my opportunity to make my comments on these particular items on consent.
Thank you, commenter. And yes, item number 10 was modified. And item number 9 has been pulled for discussion. So at this point, I don't see any other hands up in Zoom. So anybody here in the audience today who would like to make comment on our consent agenda? And if you do, please identify which item you're speaking about. Seeing no movement towards the podium, we'll bring it back to the board. Any other comments from the board?
I move approval with the modifications.
I'll second.
So we have a motion to approve by Supervisor Wilson, seconded by Supervisor Arroyo, and that includes the modification for item 10 with item 9 pulled. And we'll have a roll call vote, I guess, at this point. We don't have everybody up, do we?
I am having the same problem as before, where I can see the screen to vote, but it's just not
And you do it
registering.
and it doesn't come over to me.
Okay, well, thanks.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote then.
Thank you.
Let's go Supervisor Arroyo,
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone,
Yes.
Supervisor Bushnell,
Yes.
Supervisor Bohn,
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0.
Great, thank you very much. And at this point, we're going to go to public comment on non-agenda items. This is your opportunity to speak on anything that is not on the agenda. And again, you have 3 minutes to speak. And if you're in Zoom, it's *9 to raise your hand. And I see we do have one hand up, and that is 7454. There you go.
Here we go. So I did want to address something kind of important to us. It's called the general plan. And the general plan was adopted some years ago. A lot of things haven't been done, which were supposed to be done. And it's something I feel you have an obligation to change, because a contractor or someone coming to your area who wants to find out about what you're representing, what you're doing, reads this if they really want to find out. And it doesn't seem to be consistent. So I want to read you just a little bit about rail transportation in your general plan. This is on page 7-2, chapter 7, part 2. A potential use of the northernmost portion of the rail line considered in the 2002 Moving Goods and People Report would be to support tourism by developing an excursion train. The Northern California Logging Interpretive Association, NCLIA, which currently is Timber Heritage, seeks to create a logging-powered Humboldt-based scenic railroad excursion train. This tourist railroad would be operated from South Fork, Dyerville, north to Samoa. The Humboldt Bay Trails Feasibility Study 2007 evaluated several options for using the railroad easement for a pedestrian and bike pathway between Eureka and Arcata. NCR Board of Directors intends to focus on updating and implementing their adaptive business plan in 3 major areas of future need. It says executing public policy to protect the railroad as a public transportation asset and to promote its use, overseeing the financial accounting and record-keeping system through auditing and monitoring of all systems, pursuing new funding sources and new legislation, as well as continuing management of grant funding from existing local, state, and federal sources to improve railroad infrastructure and operations. This hasn't really been implemented as far as I can tell, and as some of you are aware, it's a pleasure to work with county and county staff and a supervisor to try and make something happen regarding this and protect this particular part of something that's spelled out quite accurately in our general plan. So if that's no longer the intent to do that, and of course it goes on to speak about how good rails with trails are and how that should be done, I strongly support that. But if it's no longer your intent to seek funding to help keep the railroad going so that the Timber Heritage Association could do it, then let's just say so and change your general plan so people like myself wouldn't come to an incorrect perception. I don't know if I have any time left, but you might read what's on cannabis there. I think there's two sections on cannabis that only are like 7 lines long.
30 seconds.
And yet we've spent all of our planning on it. Thank you for my opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, commenter, and I do not see any other hands up in Zoom at this point. So we'll go to the audience here, and if anybody wants to public comment on non-agenda items, please come on up to the podium. You've got 3 minutes. And once again, seeing nobody coming to the podium, we'll bring it back and begin with the items pulled from consent. And the one item that we have is D9, and I believe Supervisor Bushnell would like to introduce or, nope, okay. So this one is to be presented by?
Chair.
Yes.
I'm sorry, thank you. I don't have an issue with this, nor do I need a presentation. I'm just not going to vote yes on it and didn't want to not vote no on consent.
Understand, I've been in that position myself a few times. So thank you for that clarification. Director Ford, did you want to come up and give us at least a brief comments, presentation on, I believe this is just a follow-up on the previous reading.
Correct. This is thank you, Chair. John Ford, Planning and Building. This is the second reading of an ordinance that was previously introduced to the board. At the board's previous action, the direction was given to go ahead and follow through with this as it's currently written, but with subsequent action to come back with amendments to the water efficient landscape ordinance to address rural living, to address use of native plant materials, and some other things that are more particular to Humboldt County.
Very good. That is nice and brief. Thank you. And so this is basically just initiating the minimum requirements that the state has put on us.
That is correct.
And then we want to fine tune it for Humboldt County at a later date.
That is the direction that was given, yes.
Great. Seems clear to me. Is there any discussion or questions from the board? Supervisor Wilson.
I'm just going to move for approval.
Okay. We've got a motion to approve
I'll second.
and a second by Arroyo. With that, let's go ahead and do a roll call vote, please. Actually, did I take public comment on this? I did not. Excuse me. So we'll take public comment on this. We'll go to Zoom first, and we have a hand up with 7454. There you go.
Michelle Bushnell didn't delineate her concerns. I'm going to delineate mine. I feel that we're living in a rural place, and our general plan specifies that we're supposed to support rural living. I can understand some of these constraints happening in other areas. There seems to be a whole bunch of problems with definition. We seem to, it's not a fits-all thing, and if this was part of a legislative platform you put back, I would have a little bit of pushback as far as how this is being, even the minimum implemented on us. I guess if we can't change it and go below the minimum, but I feel this is nothing but more and more regulation, people trying to control our rural lifestyle with the things that seem to be more appropriate in your higher density areas such as Los Angeles and other areas. So that's my input from the public. Thank you for my opportunity to speak.
Thank you, commenter. And is there anybody here in the audience today who would like to comment on item D9 from the consent calendar? And again, seeing nobody coming forward, we have a motion and a second for this item. Is there any final discussion by the board? All right, Nikki, let's go ahead and do a roll call vote, please.
Okay, we'll start with Supervisor Bohn,
No.
Supervisor Bushnell,
No.
Supervisor Wilson,
Yes.
Supervisor Arroyo,
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 3-2.
Thank you very much. Okay, at this point, we're going to go into our regular agenda, and we have some wonderful presentations here lined up today for us. And the first one is going to be from Life Plan Humboldt, and we have our previous county health officer, Ann Lindsay, to present. Welcome.
Great, thank you for having me. Let's see, I have a slide presentation, Nikki. I'm hoping to explain to you why Life Plan Humboldt is a good idea for the whole county and ask for your support in our effort to obtain state funding. So, coming up, okay. Yeah.
And thank you for the wonderful brochures here.
Right, we have a lot of, fantastic website too, if you want to check it out, it's listed on the brochure. We got supporters here in the audience and I believe online as well. So we are interested in making a senior supportive living community, and there are a number of reasons why we feel that rural adults, older adults are vulnerable, and social isolation has been shown to increase the risk for dementia and depression, and if you can't drive anymore, you're really prone to social isolation. We've seen in natural disasters how older adults, particularly if you live alone, are really susceptible to, or it's harder for them to respond adequately to natural disasters. Nutrition may suffer if, preparing food is difficult or getting to the grocery store. Fall risk is heightened in homes not designed for frailty, and only 3% of our homes are actually designed for people who are mobility challenges. That's across the nation. Wow. And you might have trouble getting to medical care, and home care is hard to find. It can cost up to $30,000 a month. And family caregivers often step in, and that takes them out of the workforce and sometimes compromises their future retirement resources, such as Social Security, if they're taken out of the workforce. So Life Plan Humboldt's a nonprofit. We were founded in 2020, and we want to build a resident-led community for people 60 or older. And it will be a combination of independent cottages and apartments, and then we'll provide assisted living level services to people in their homes and memory care all on one campus. And we'll have dining and fitness and wellness center, meeting space, picnic areas, and trails. But we really want to provide a lifelong opportunity for learning and growth and wellness and integrate into the broader community. There's nothing like what we're planning for 200 miles, and people often leave the community to go to Medford or Santa Rosa. And we are fortunate to have good assisted living, and we have a number of memory care options, but nothing integrated into a vibrant, independent living options. We started with a market feasibility study and really supported our project, and you guys probably are aware that the older population is growing increasingly over the next 20, 30 years. And 80% of 75-year-olds own their own homes, which is, I thought that was a high number. It's interesting. And there are 17,000 households of people age 65 or older. So the market study confirmed that there's an ample demand and a need here for our project. We have fantastic leadership, people with government experience and information technology experience and nursing education, and community service district. Greg Orsini was head of the community services district in McKinleyville. Joanne Shook is one of the founders of the Redwood Coast Village. George Williamson and Kirk Gerard have ample planning experience, and Joyce Hayes is the former director of the Senior Resource Center and founder of the PACE program, has really been a great asset, as well as Patrick Clary, who's got media action here and former head of the Humboldt Area Foundation. We're currently negotiating for property in McKinleyville, and it's part of the, will be part of the McKinleyville Town Center, and we're looking at the 14.5 acres that's south of Hiller. It's a fantastic location for us. We've surveyed prospective members, and they all want to be within walking distance of amenities, and there certainly are a lot of amenities in McKinleyville. Well, we actually looked at 15 properties throughout the county, and we have some alternatives, but this is where we're working currently. We really want to have a commitment to diversity and access, and we're partnering right now in partnership with the Rural Community Housing Development Corporation to build 30 to 60 affordable senior cottages and apartments on the same campus. And that would mean that the people in affordable housing would have more than housing. They'd be part of a community and all the supports. And this will be a separate funding stream, but we will be cooperating. We are aiming to make the entry fee, Life Plan Community works with people pay an entry fee and then a monthly fee. We're working to make entry fees available, accessible to mid-income seniors in Humboldt County. And an entry fee assures you a lifetime residence with more help as needed. You don't actually own the home, and certainly all the maintenance and services and landscaping and all is all taken care of, and that's one of my models. When something goes wrong at my house now, just call maintenance. But And the entry fees, if you actually pay a higher entry fee when you enter into the community, then your estate gets 80% of it back. So it's a way for people to cash in their homes, maintain their equity for their heirs, and still be supported and live in a wonderful, supportive community. So we're gonna open up housing for the workforce here. You know, if we have 144 cottages and apartments, that'll open up. I have a 3-bedroom home that I don't need anymore. And it's projected to be a $75 million project, and we're planning to create 40 full-time jobs and have a $4 million a year operating budget. So it'll be the economic engine of the McKinleyville Town Center as well, just having all the people there who walk rather than drive and frequent and go to support the businesses there. I want to remind you that the housing needs to accommodate the growing population of elders was identified as the #1 housing challenge in the Humboldt County Housing Plan. It is really good for the health of seniors who move in. And we also, you're probably familiar with the PACE program, which is unusual for a rural community to have a program like this, but we'd really like to provide PACE-like services to keep people out of skilled nursing in whatever way possible. We have an arrangement with Cal Poly to place students on internships and service learning. And the OLLI program, the senior education part of the Cal Poly, would love to co-locate with us. And we already are talking to area schools, secondary and high schools, about relationship to integrate. We don't want to be isolated senior community. We really want to be located together with people, other younger people. And that we are committed to environmental stewardship. We are actually gotten a small grant from PG&E to start planning to potentially be a microgrid, which would be fantastic and really take pressure off of the electrical system. And we'll have van transportation for people. And as I said, just being close to local amenities will keep us out of our cars and connected. We have great support. 1,200 people get our monthly newsletter. We've had 7,900 volunteer hours logged, and a few people refuse to log in because they don't want to see how much they're doing here. We've surveyed 257 out of 460 people surveyed are likely or very likely to move into Life Plan Humboldt in 3 to 5 years. And that's after looking at the pricing and giving their input into what they'd like to see there. We have design preferences from over 700 people. And I'm really proud that the community stepped up, and we've gotten $1,022,327.07 donated as of December 31st. And we exceeded our $1 million goal. We have a number of business supporters, and some more are waiting for us to sign a property purchase agreement before they jump in. And we also have received generous support from local foundations and looking forward to continued support from them. And it's rather unusual. Many of the Life Plan communities are started by churches or educational institutions, but we really feel that the heart and the soul and the support is here. We'll need to raise $2 million locally. We need another $2.5 to $3 million from loans, grants, and government support. If we're able to get, we're asking you for a letter of support. So Mike McGuire, our state senator, is carrying a budget request for $2.5 million. If we're able to get all that support, it'll allow us to keep the entry fees in a reasonable range. If we have to borrow $2.5 million, it could raise the entry fees 5 or 10%. So we say we're the little engine that could, and we're gathering steam. And I think that's the end. So if you have questions, now is your time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And I will say that it's been a real pleasure working with you with the McKinleyville Municipal Advisory Committee and property owner Ann Pearson, who has this wonderful vision for McKinleyville to create this town center, and thank goodness for that. But thank you for all your participation there. And just to clarify, Life Care Humboldt has now become Life Plan Humboldt, correct? That's the name
That's
change?
correct.
Yeah, great. In case anybody was wondering.
I
Supervisor
need to
Bohn.
update my slideshow.
No worries. Supervisor Bohn.
This has been a long time coming. I think we talked about it at the senior resource, 9 years ago about something, and I was glad you guys took this up. It's almost amazing that you could almost take your name off of it and put the new facility that's being built for the challenged young adults going out on their own. We Are Up. You guys are running 15 acres hand in hand. It was too bad they don't have 30. You could, that way they could interjoin with the youth and with the people coming out. Yeah, this is a great plan. I think it's great. I'll say this, if we can give $1 million to the Crabs baseball, hopefully we can get $2.5 million for the old folks, me. So I was talking to the Golden Girls about that. But as we do this, now 144 units, 250 to 400 people, what's going to be the criteria? Who's going to run the cut list? How are you going to do that? I mean, because it looks like there's going to be an overdemand. And I know there's an overdemand because, as we know, Kurt Kramer builds like type things with people that are coming out. My mother, before she passed away, was getting ready to move into one. Senior facilities and stuff, and they're next to amenities, and all this. This is all great. Who gets to be the hammer?
Well, that's a good question. In order to get this bond financing, we have to prove that we have community interest. And so at some point, we're going to have what's called a priority club, where people pay $1,000, which is totally refundable, to show that they have interest in the community. And experience in other communities, a lot of people say they're interested, but when it comes to selling their house and moving in, that's a challenge. So it's great that we have 257 people are interested, but the more the merrier. But there will be that initial period. We'll have a marketing center where we can tell people, how do you sell your house and move in, and what are the fine details, and what does that mean to your finances, and help people. And at some point, we'll ask people to put 10% down, and we have to pre-sell with 10% down, 70% of the units before we can get our bond financing. So
basically, the put up or shut up model.
Yeah.
And because there are going to be, I want that, and then they never use it or don't, when they realize it's going to cost them directly.
But
Great.
people who read our newsletter and support us will be the first to hear, obviously.
Well, I'm certainly, by presentations and all the time you spent, I'm certain there are people planning for this already, downsizing. I know, that's what they told me, so I just, and I'm not going to cross the east no matter what. But anyway, no, I think it's great, so I appreciate it. And can I put in for a room too?
Great, thank you for your support. Any other questions?
Yeah, any other questions from the board? Yes, Supervisor Wilson.
Not really a question, just, a voice of support for the model. And I was hoping that was me nearer to my house, but no, it's a little farther away, but that's all right. I just want to also thank you for emphasizing sort of the livable, walkable community element of that. And also, I've been surprised that I have recently been receiving AARP requests, which is always shocking when it happens to you the first time.
They hit you up early.
But what I know about that organization is that they very much emphasize walkable communities, livable communities, integrated communities as a passion of theirs, and so I'm just putting it out there that it's nationwide, this trend to really recognize as we move into our later years in life that having that connectivity with people and community and not have it be reliant on vehicles all the time is really very, very important. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I was a family practitioner in Arcadia for 28 years, and as I grew older, so did my patients. But a number of them were older, couldn't drive anymore, and their family had moved away. And it wasn't always the most pleasant place to be. And that's part of what's motivated me to get working on this. Thank you.
That's great. Supervisor Bohn?
And the only other, and it's funny, Dr. Baird says almost the same exact thing. I was up and he was talking about, and in his retirement, he's still driving patients to appointments and stuff like that for the reason. But he also said that's a choice they've made. So who satisfies the bond, the $75 million bond? Does the bond go, is that, there's a mention of the 75 billion.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll have to have liquidity support, and actually some of the local foundations have offered to provide that. And we've already in contact with Ziegler, which is a bank in Chicago that arranges bond funding for nonprofit life plan communities. And they're very supportive of our business model, and they've advised us along the way. So it's actually the one in Healdsburg that's starting now, had borrowed $300 million, and they were green bond, which we plan to be, and they within 10 days got 17 offers. So I think that the market's good for it.
Oh, I don't doubt it. It was a question that was going to be asked. So.
Yep, we're on it.
Great, thank you. And again, it's very exciting times for McKinleyville with your project, and as was mentioned, we are up, and the whole town center process, for those that aren't aware, it's a really concerted community effort to try and figure out how to create a real character for the town of McKinleyville, and a walkable space that has a park, wetlands, retail, housing, senior housing, all these elements all kind of combined together, and we're reaching close to the final, recommendations from the MCMAC on this. And again, without the support of the landowner and Pearson, I don't think any of this would be happening. But thank you for your dedication and your group of folks that have really been working hard to create this wonderful option for seniors in our community. So I thank you for that. So Supervisor Arroyo.
I am curious, should this this particular funding stream not work out, would it be helpful to have the discretion granted in this item, when we do come to a vote on it, to continue supporting the project with other letters? I mean, so that not that I wouldn't love for you to come back, but should you need to pursue additional funding sources, I'd be amenable to that if that's something this board has done in the past or
That's a great suggestion. It seems doable to me to have it as a generic support along with the specific support that was requested. I don't see any problem with that, and I don't see our county council having any issues with that either. So, yes, Supervisor Bushnell, thank you.
Thank you. So clarification on a letter coming from this board in the future, would the board then be, how would we see the letter to know that we're all okay with it?
I would imagine it would have to come back on the agenda if it was a specific letter of support. Of course, each of us as individuals can provide letters
Sure.
of support at any time without even coming before the full board. But to get the full board support, we do need a specific item in front of us, I'm assuming. Thank you.
But individually, we're free to do
Yes,
what we wish.
that's my understanding. I'm
Okay,
County
just a
Council.
clarification.
Yes, in order for the board to approve a letter for future funding sources, it would either need to come back to the board or the CAO could be authorized to write letters on behalf of the board regarding future funding sources. But for clarification purposes, coming back to the board and explaining what funding sources are being supported is probably the best course.
Thank you for that clarification and the question. Appreciate that. So it sounds like we can provide that generic support, but then, of course, the specific would come back, and I imagine you'll get support again from this board, from what I can tell. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and go to public comment. We'll go to the Zoom first, and we have one hand up, and that is 7454. Star 6, you're on mute. There you go.
Yes, Kent Sawatsky here, and I strongly support these kind of projects. I see we got Kirk Gerard and George Williamson. Is Dan Johnson involved in this one? That seems to be the group there. Anyway, I always question on these projects, and I haven't done the math, I'll do it a little later, on how much per dwelling unit this bond is having to fund. Rex mentioned another contractor there who, does good work. I hope everybody will have a chance at participating in this as far as building and construction goes. I have a little bit different philosophy, and I know McKinleyville is wonderful, but I'm trying to design similar projects myself. May not need to go to bonding. We'll see what happens on the thing. Property's all free and clear already, and I'm the owner. It's one of your guiding principles in your general plan. Number 7 is support individual rights to live in urban, suburban, rural, or remote areas of the county while using a balanced approach for protecting natural resources, especially open space, water resources, fisheries habitat, water quality, in cooperation with state and federal agencies. I'm going to be going, I know McKinleyville's nice and everything, but I'm going to be going more toward rural areas. Some of you are aware, beautiful spot out there behind the school out there in Willow Creek, some beautiful places with nature. I'm within a little distance right now, 16 acres. So all of us would like to get letters of support as we move forward with projects and have your support, not only to do these fine projects, which I consider some of them equivalent to tiny home villages or something like that, not only for the elderly, but we also need to give the young people who are just starting out a chance for them to buy a portable house and ownership and things of that nature. So hopefully this all develop and evolve, and we can all find our little niches here. But again, your support for these fine projects is appreciated. Let's not look strictly toward one category, but let's see what we can do to support everybody having affordable housing. Thank you for my opportunity to speak on this topic.
Thank you, commenter. And I do not see any other hands up in Zoom. So at this point, we'll go to the audience here today. If anybody would like to comment on this item, please come up to the podium, and you've got 3 minutes to make comments. So I'm going to assume that maybe some of the folks in the audience might support this, and this is a nice way to be able to say that. Thank you for being here today. So with that, I'll bring it back to the board.
I'll make a motion to support the letter of support. But I just, as a clarification, and also authorize the CAO to support this project in the future, which basically almost makes it a not platform, but it's a policy moving forward. I think the purpose of that is that it doesn't have to come back to the board necessarily in the future, but that's just my understanding. And I don't want to nitpick, but it just seems like that's the point. So that if there are other letters of support required, there's no need to bring it back. It's sort of streamlining, if you will.
So we have a motion.
I'll second.
Motion by Wilson and second by Arroyo. Any additional comment from the board? Supervisor Bohn.
Yeah, I tend to agree on that. I don't know how much extra it would be to put it on a consent if anybody was worried, but we're talking at the bottom about, critical that LPH can secure $75 million in bond financing. It sounds like we're almost approving that also without naming Ziegler, Chase, any of the big names. So I don't see an issue with what Supervisor Wilson said. I think just out of matter of protocol, and so we keep it somewhat consistent, it would be nice to have the letter just on consent, wouldn't waste any time. We could all see it, and if it has all our names on it, I just, not that I don't trust everybody, but it's just a nice way for the public to know that we are still further supporting, and it's also showing the full support for LPH that we are supporting it, and it keeps it up front that they are still moving forward. So I can go either way. I think it says enough there. It would be nice to see this come back to us on just consent, so we're aware. It's nice when all 5 of us are aware of something.
Thank you. Any other board comment?
I
Supervisor
would,
Bushnell?
is the motioner willing to make that request, that it would come back on consent?
Yeah, but I just, as a point of clarification, we have letters of support that go out that don't come on our consent for a lot of items, but that's okay. If this is important to this board to have those come back, then I'm happy to have that be part of the motion.
Thank you.
I'll also accept the amendment, but I will also note that I think, by saying in concept we support, we are not frankly on the hook to do much besides say we support them getting grant funding for this. And so I think for items like this in the future, I'm comfortable with, considering something to authorize the CAO's, discretion to support things like this if we support the project concept overall. For example, this is a $2.5 million request. If that were not successful and they wanted to go for a $2.2 million request, the letter would have to be changed. So that's the type of change I'm talking about, but I'm also comfortable with it coming back on consent so that everyone is aware.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, we had the motion that's amended, along with the seconder agreeing to the amendment to basically approve staff recommendation at this point. And what I will also say is that as the 5th District representative where this project is, if you have a really quick turnaround and you need a letter of support, just ask me for it, and I can provide that on letterhead from myself. I know that for funders, I don't think often it matters a lot to them whether or not it's from the whole board or from one individual board member. I think they just see the letter there, it's supportive. So if you're in a time crunch, please utilize that process. But if not, we'll bring it back on consent, and that can happen pretty quickly as well. That sounds like the preference or the agreement that we've come to on the board. So with that, let's go ahead and do a roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair Madrone. Supervisor Bohn?
Yes.
Supervisor Arroyo?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yep.
Supervisor Bushnell?
Yep.
And Supervisor Madrone?
Yes,
Thank
5-0.
you. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you so much. It feels good when you do that. And somehow. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. All right, and we're going to jump into our next presentation here, item H2, which is a California Road Charge Caltrans presentation. And so there's some changes happening with supporting our roads, and I'm sure this will be a great presentation to hear. And who is here today that's going to make that presentation? Right here. Great. Oh, I remember you from the HCOG meeting.
Yeah.
Good to see you again.
Good morning. I don't know, I just sent the clerk my presentation via email because I don't know if it had gotten there, so.
We're
So I
checking.
either have a computer that I can plug in or I can just go with it, whatever works.
No worries. You want to introduce yourself while we're waiting to get that up?
Absolutely. My name is Lauren Prahota. I am the Road Charge Program Manager for the California Department of Transportation. And I oversee basically a big research program that I'm going to talk to you about today, just kind of giving an overview of an issue coming at us as a state, what we're doing research-wise to prepare for it, and some opportunities for you guys to potentially be involved in that. So I'm just going to go.
I just got the
My apologies
presentation,
for
so if
that.
you want to talk just a couple more seconds and I'll get it loaded for you.
No problem. I'm really excited that I could be here in person today to join with you all. I've had the pleasure of presenting to several groups at this point in Humboldt County because we have one of your mayors on our technical advisory committee that's advising the state as we explore this research. So it's really great to have Stacy as a representative of this area, and she has really pulled out all the stops in making sure that we are communicating to your region to make sure that your guys' voice is at the table as we develop this. So, all right, you guys are
Great job, Nikki.
fantastic. Thank you so much. So let me jump in. So the thing that's coming at us all. As you may be aware, the vast majority of our transportation system, both at the state level and the local level, is funded by the gas tax. This is something we've relied on for 100 years to get us where we need to go. But as we look to the future, there are some issues that are coming at us down the road with the gas tax that it's going to make it that we can't rely on that to fund our transportation system in the future. And this plays out in 4 different ways. First off, our cars are getting more fuel efficient, which is fantastic in so many ways. It saves us money, it's better for the environment, and more efficient. But that means you pay less in gas tax because you're buying less gas. In addition, more and more vehicles are not using gas at all, and so they're not paying into the gas tax system at all either. thirdly, we all have been experiencing inflation. We all experience that reality of a dollar not going as far as it used to. At the state level, we addressed this with SB 1, which did index the gas tax to inflation. However, the federal gas tax has not been increased since 1993. So this is both a state and federal issue. And as these three issues play out, we get into the fourth issue, that we're seeing a larger and larger stretch between what different people are paying to use the transportation system. Those that can only afford low efficiency vehicles or need them for their way of life or business are paying a lot more to use the road than those who can afford newer vehicles or who have gone electric and things like that. So we're seeing this greater unfairness in what people are paying in terms of their taxes. So the state has started to think about, okay, this is coming. This is going to happen. How do we prepare for it? What can we do as a new collection method to stabilize our existing revenue? So that's what I get to be in charge of. Looking at this new idea of taxing based on the mileage used instead of the gallons you buy. So road charge is something the state is researching to collect a per mile fee. And the way that we're currently looking at this in terms of research is this would be a replacement to the gas tax. So basically, we're taking one collection mechanism and switching it out for another. So that means we're not necessarily looking at changing how the money is spent. The money is already being spent as we speak for our state and local roads, transit, active transportation, all those things. We're looking at one per mile rate for all passenger vehicles, because again, we want to bring that fairness back into the tax system so that everyone's paying the same to use the road. We're not necessarily trying to change any behaviors through this. It's just this kind of basic user fee to access the road. So I want to just kind of touch on that fairness aspect. And these are just some examples of typical types of vehicles using the average number of miles a Californian might drive in a month. And as you can see, there's quite a range, depending on the type of vehicle you drive, in what you're paying to drive the same number of miles. But if you look at a road charge, again, as we're moving to that same per mile fee, that brings it into equilibrium. So everyone, again, is paying that same amount to use the same number of miles. So just kind of an overview of how this would work. So kind of in the back office sense of things, this is how we envision the structure might work. So we'd have a state oversight agency that would certify independent third-party account managers, so private sector companies, who would manage the day-to-day interaction with the taxpayer and the account management type of thing. This could be any sort of business that really excels at account management and can partner it with the mileage collection aspect. So in some of our pilots, we've tested that with things like usage-based insurance or ride sharing. I could envision something like Verizon or utility companies. We're going to be partnering with a tolling entity in our next pilot. So there's lots of potential options there for different types of companies to come in and partner with the state in hopes of bringing administrative costs down, adapting to future changes in technology probably more quickly than the state can. And also just there's often a greater trust in the public with trusting their data to private companies than to the government. So at the end of the day, all that the state gets is the number of miles and the tax due. There's no need for any location information. What this looks like for the taxpayer is a lot of different potential options. There are a lot of different ways that you could potentially report your mileage, and they range from very low-tech options to very high-tech. And each one has its pluses and minuses. We want to have a range of options so that individuals can make that choice for themselves and the government's not making it for them. The low-tech ones tend to be more chosen by those who are really, really interested in protecting their privacy. The high-tech ones tend to be people who like efficiency and ease of use. So on the low-end side, for example, you might have something like a third-party odometer read. So envision something like going in for a smog check, that kind of situation. On the high-tech side, we go all the way up to in-vehicle telematics that you see in things like Teslas and things like that, where you can do a lot of automatic reporting that includes your location that can give you a more precise and accurate tax bill. All of those options we envision being available, and we envision the system adapting into future technology as well. And again, stressing that we want to make sure all taxpayers have the choice that they can make about what's best for their life. Just looking at the national picture, all states are dealing with this issue. The federal government is dealing with this issue. And so there's been a lot of interest in looking at road use charges as a potential solution to the problems with the gas tax. So you can see from this map, there are 3 states that already have active road charge programs. Those are the states in yellow. The green states have all done pilots, testing it out in their particular state systems, and all the blue states are doing research on it. In addition, last year's federal transportation bill included a national pilot that we expect to get underway this year to look at it as potentially a solution for the federal gas tax as well. So there's a lot of interest and a lot of momentum building around this idea. You can see it's states on both sides of the political spectrum, coast and middle. You know, there's a lot of practicality about this kind of usage-based fee solution that appeals to many. So we have done a couple of pilots in California, and we are doing another one coming up here soon. It's going to go live in March. And this particular pilot, we're calling it the Public-Private Roads Project. We are really focusing in on rural and tribal communities. We want to understand the impact of this potential system on these communities and their unique ways of life and issues. What we'll be testing on the technical side of things, we'll be testing one of those high-tech mileage reporting options that does use GPS. And the reason we're doing that is we want to explore the potential in rural communities to, again, have a more precise tax payment. So, for example, the situation we envision is if you have, say, a farmer who's driving on a private frontage road that's exactly parallel to the public highway. In one case, he should be paying a tax, in the other, he should not. Right now, under the gas tax system, there's no way that you can differentiate between that. And, you know, we have issues about potentially tribal land and things like that. We want to explore all that. We want to understand if there are any tax benefits specifically for rural drivers in embracing those higher tech solutions. There may not be, there may be. That's why you do a pilot, to test it and find out the answer. So we, again, we really want to bring through this effort the rural and tribal voices to the table as this idea is being developed and researched, so that they can shape it and, you know, express what your priorities are, what your concerns are, love it, hate it, everything. We want to know it all. So we are recruiting for this pilot right now. That's the link that you can go and sign up at. We are offering participant incentives of up to $250 each. If you give us your time, basically you'll need to sign up. You'll have a little device sent to you to plug into the OBD2 port of your vehicle. Then you just drive around for 6 months, as you usually would, and then take some surveys. And that's it. So, as I said, we're hoping to have this go live in March, so we're about a month away. So we really encourage folks to sign up if you're interested. But also, if there are places you'd like to have in your communities to have us come and talk to your community about this and get feedback, things like that, again, we really want to make sure that the rural voice is at the table and is being heard and has an opportunity to express thoughts, ask questions, and all of that. So that's what I wanted to share with you today, and that's my contact information. You're always welcome to reach out if you have more specific questions, but in the moment, please ask them as well.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentation. I really like the fairness parts to all this that you're trying to figure out, and those surveys would certainly help with that. Do you know what the current percentages are of how much our gas tax goes to local roads versus how much goes to state highways? Do you know what that percentage is right now?
So it's a 60-40 split. It's written out in statute, and I never remember which is the 60 and which is the 40 off the top of my head. But I think it's the 60 that goes to locals, and that's going to be split. Am I wrong? Well, okay. The local portion is then split between cities and counties, and there's a formula based on VMT and all those things.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, observations are that it looks like Caltrans is able to repave a highway about every 5 years. I'll just point out, you know, from Arcata to Trinidad, that happened this last year at a big lagoon. And it had just been done 4 or 5 years before. It was a complete repave. Whereas on our county roads, it looks to me like we're not even able to pave them once every 30 years or so. I mean, the county roads are just falling apart left and right. And we all, I'm sure, as board members, get a lot of input from our constituents. I pay my taxes. Why aren't you taking care of the roads, right? So, at any rate, I just very much appreciate the fairness consideration, and because we're really hurting for funding for our county roads in a big way. But anyway, let's go to the board and see if there's any questions. Supervisor Bohn?
Yeah, and I always ask, why aren't we partnering with Oregon, since theirs is already up and running, taking a look? I know we're a bigger state, but they have, you know, per capita, they have the same amount of vehicles according to, you know. And as this moves forward, I mean, right now the system is pretty easy, because it's very simple. We only collect the road tax from very few people because it's paid at the rack. We don't have to go to the people, the stations, or anything else. It is charged at the rack. We get our money within 10 days. The state gets their money within 10 days by law. And then everybody else has to worry, you know, they've got to collect it at the pump or at the distributor and things like that. So as we move forward, and I've always wondered, will this affect DMV fees also? Because those are supposed to go towards parks, you know, same thing as road tax, road maintenance and everything else. Because I see that $32 average up there, but I pay about a $74 a month average just on my pickup. So, which gets 26 miles to the gallon, which is very fuel efficient. So, and I have an electric pickup ordered, but I'm finding out my mileage will drop tremendously. But I'm trying to figure out, does that change? And I appreciate this. I saw this. I think you were in Monterey, I believe, for RCRC. So I appreciate hearing this all again. But I'm trying to figure out why we don't partner more instead of starting a whole new. And the thing I like about this, I don't think we're starting a whole new regime, because you look like a one-man band doing this. So,
yes, I do get the opportunity, especially right now, to travel around and meet a lot of great people. So first off, we absolutely are partnering with Oregon. We have learned a lot from them. They were the first state to really come up with this idea and have really pioneered it. We're actually a part of an organization called Ruck America, which is a group of now 20 states, starting on the west, and we're moving east, that are looking at this issue. And we have done a lot of research together, especially in terms of an interoperable multi-state system, because obviously we don't just stay in one state, so we have to be able to figure out that interoperability as well. And we've actually done a pilot with Oregon to test a kind of a central clearinghouse model that's inspired by, if you're familiar with the International Fuel Tax Agreement for commercial vehicles, which is the current system being used to sort out gas taxes for interstate trucking travel. So it's that same kind of concept of a clearinghouse that would sort out the taxes. So we absolutely are working on that front. In terms of, I'm trying to remember through the list of your questions. What was your last question?
well, I'm wondering what this does with DMV fees.
Oh, right.
If we're going to talk about the operation of a vehicle and the DMV fees, I know we got, I have a light commercial vehicle, but
Right.
I mean, and then I also wonder how we're going to do, I have 2 or 3 or more antique vehicles, considered antique vehicles, who have no electronics on them whatsoever, and I'm not going to be able to plug anything in.
Right.
So-
that's again to the point of having different options, because we do have a range of vehicles we have to work with as well, and we expect we'll always have some historic vehicles and things like that. In terms of DMV fees, so that'll get into a policy question of which revenue streams get switched over to a RUC. So the kind of the obvious one is the gas tax, but then you have diesel taxes as well, and then you have some registration fees. So there's the road improvement fee, which is that $100-ish fee on alternative fuel vehicles. And I expect that one would get rolled in as well, because that, again, that's getting all vehicles onto a single system for that fairness aspect. But then there's also the transportation improvement fee, that those both came on as part of SB1. That goes to transportation as well, so you could debate that one. The rest of the registration fees, weight fees specifically, go to paying off some debt. The rest of them go to funding the DMV and the CHP. So I think that those would be potentially less likely to be switched over. Again, all of that would need to be debated in the legislature. You could argue it multiple ways.
Okay, and last question. So we're not looking at, and I nothing against the big gas companies, even though I noticed that one of them just had $388 billion in profit last year. But with that being said, so we're going to take the gas tax off, the 54 cents or whatever it's up to now and things. We're going to take that off. Do we really think we're going to see a 54-cent drop at the pump? Because there's going to be a refinery go down, or there's going to be, weather back east that's going to affect us here, even though we produce all our own fuel here. I don't see that being a benefit to us, so it's not going to cost us that $32. We're going to see an increase to there. I just worry how this is going to use, where we have now, we have a system that actually, we have a collection point at the DMV, we have a collection point at the pump that both work, and we have a collection pump when vehicles sold, renewed every year. You have to be renewed every year. It's a simple thing. So what we do is take a look at what we need, and maybe we look at the alternate. I think 12% of all vehicles sold in the United States last year were electric. 18% of all new vehicles in California were EVs, is I think the number I heard. So maybe it's time, and that's wonderful they're doing that and everything, but is it time that they pay their fair share? And just saving the environment is wonderful, and I applaud them for that. But they're also using, utilizing, our resources. So I'm just saying, is there any other way, or is this a done deal and we're just going to kind of figure out how we do it?
This is not a done deal by any means. Obviously, at this stage, we're still kind of in research mode. The whole thing, as it is a tax change, it would need to go to the state legislature, likely take a two-thirds vote since it is a tax change. So it's definitely something that's still being explored. So there's no final answer at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Comments? Supervisor Wilson.
Yeah, just the straight mileage formula, I mean, it sounds fair, but in some ways it has some inequities associated with it too, having to do with vehicle size and weight, and how much maintenance and wear and tear on a road a larger, more heavier vehicle has. And then also just the facilities that have to be designed to that size, and then the safety facilities, because as we know, deaths from vehicles by larger vehicles is higher. And so there's just so much, there are inherent costs to the different, or differentials between those things. And so I'm hoping that you guys are considering that in that discussion. And I know that there is a tendency for larger vehicles in more rural areas due to work and other things, and those can be formulated into that fairness equation. But I just want to make sure that at the very least you guys are considering that, because it is not necessarily fair or equitable that someone who is using less resources is subsidizing those who are using more resources. And I just want to, in the public sphere.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's an excellent point. There are definitely many, many factors that you can consider. And at the end of the day, one person's idea of fairness is not necessarily another person's. So there's all those things that we need to consider. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important to get so much feedback from the public about what they think is really a good, fair system for the state. I will say in terms of weight, weight is an important factor. Obviously, we think about that a lot at Caltrans in terms of the strength and long-lastingness of our assets and pavement and bridges. I will say that the relationship between weight and the impacts to our transportation system is not linear, it's actually exponential. So what that means on a practical level is that at the lower ends of the weight categories, there's really not that much difference in terms of the impact to the roadway and bridges. And really that's everything, what kind of 10,000 pounds and below, which is the vast majority of passenger vehicles. So that's one reason why we kind of say one rate for that. When you get above that, really into the commercial vehicle space, the 10,000 to 26,000, 50, 80, and even above 80,000. That's where you see that significant damage. So I think that a road charge for commercial vehicles would likely look different than the passenger vehicle side of things. We definitely are seeking input from the trucking industry and other impacted groups and stakeholders on that front. But that's how we kind of see that weight factor playing out in this rate structure. But you're right, there are a lot of different ways you could look at it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Supervisor Arroyo.
Thank you for your presentation. And I had seen it before, but it was great to kind of digest the information some more. I'm curious whether, just thinking about what you just said about the nonlinear relationship between vehicles and their weights and the impact. Is there also any focus right now on establishing transportation routes that are more strictly defined, like trucking corridors or routes that the state will kind of try to define more clearly? I know we've especially had concerns around this with communities that are bisected by a highway. So yeah, I wonder if that's part of the conversation as well.
That would be outside the scope of my particular program, so I can't really give you a specific answer to that, but I'm happy to take that back. We have a lot of people at Caltrans who are thinking deeply on a lot of things, and obviously we have many things in our communities historically that we need to address and consider fixing on that front, and our economy without freight is in a pretty sad state. So all balancing all those factors is important. So happy to try and circle back with you on that question because I just don't know the answer.
Great. So at this point, let's go ahead and go out to the public and get their comments. We'll start with the Zoom, and the first hand up is 7454. There you go.
Thank you for the public opportunity to communicate with Caltrans a little bit. Public perception is that we're in the position we're in because of the gross negligence of our prior legislators over all the years not keeping up with inflation on tax. Now I think our county is what, $260 or whatever $1 million as far as deferred maintenance on this goes. That's quite irritating. A little bit of feedback as far as process goes. I think you're going to have a really hard time unless the government's willing to go ahead and install the infrastructure into each individual vehicle so that it can be assessed mileage that way. I think you're going to have a two system for now, for quite a while, where the gas tax system still is in existence. I'm guessing that technology is basically a smart meter. Strongly support the ability to separate out where travel miles are being done. In other words, somebody should not have to pay any tax for the miles they're on their own private road, their own private ground. That's kind of like the red diesel you'd use in a diesel thing when it's being used not on the highway. Hopefully that will be able to be sorted out. I also strongly would support the fact that anytime someone's driving on a county road, not 60-40, but 100% of that money come back to the county as far as us working on our roads, which we will do at our own discretion. And I think that's something that could be very good, could come out of this, that we actually get all of it to stay here rather than it going back somewhere else and then coming back with grants and applications and going through that process where it gets watered down as far as what we receive back. The public does want to have input on the projects. Caltrans has, like a great support for last chance grade, very little support for a single-use off-ramp in the Trinidad area. And so I hope Caltrans will pay attention to our individual projects and hopefully move forward with some form of ability for us to tax these other vehicles appropriately. Thank you for my opportunity to speak.
Thank you, commenter. And next we have 2122. *6 to unmute. There you go.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. This is Uriah Driscoll. There's a couple of things. I'm happy that this is coming forward, and while there's certainly uses for electric vehicles, they have flown under the radar. I would think that a simple mechanism would be through the DMV and by establishing a average mileage and to be calculated, of course, and then each year's registration would pay more or less depending on the mileage actually traveled. A simple check in with say a smog station or other qualified location would identify the amount of mileage. So that would be a pretty simple way of doing that. Another question, and I also commend you for bringing up the freight and commercial vehicles really benefit us all, and I think we really need to recognize that. Yes, they are more impactful because of the weight, but they bring us the supplies that we need to keep going. And like you said, our society, our communities would be in dire straits without those commercial vehicles. Another point, I know that Caltrans is funding a lot of these bike roads, and I would think that if you're going to charge electric vehicles, perhaps charging and licensing electric bicycles to help pay for some of these trails that are really just bike roads might also be of an advantage. I think that would be a fair way to do that, and also would by registering electric bicycles would also be able to hold them accountable for use on some of these trails that, when they're going 30 miles an hour, it's a lot different than someone pedaling along with, 8 or 10 miles an hour. So anyway, those are some thoughts that I think are worth considering, and thank you for my opportunity. Good day.
Thank you, commenter. And I will say, yeah, trails are absolutely a part of our transportation system. I mean, a lot of folks think they're just for recreation, but I think we know that that's no longer true. So I appreciate the comments. So we'll go, I don't see any other hands up in Zoom, so we'll go ahead and go to those here in the audience today who would like to come forward and make any comments. And you've got 3 minutes, and we do have one person. Come on up here, Holly, to the podium if that works for you, or you can sit down at the chair. That mic also works.
Could you move back, please?
There you go. Welcome.
Thank you. I can't begin to tell you how I have to clean that up too. I'm going to take a shotgun approach to this with short PITHY comments. First of all, I like to start with a joke because that's what they taught us in speech 1 up at Humboldt State. Sometime back, I don't remember which Caltrans fiasco it was, but someone on KMUD called in and said, Caltrans is an agency in search of a project. Okay, that's my joke. Now, when I lived in Texas for about 18, 19 years, there was a joke about how many Aggies does it take to change a light bulb? 5. 1 to hold the bulb and the other 4 to turn him. You get my drift here? I don't even know where to start. I was going to mention the different colored diesel fuel, but can't cover that. If Uri is so upset about bicycles, when do we start licensing horses? Let's see. I had some other thoughts, but I think I've made my, I remember. Some years back, there was a slide that went in where you take the off-ramp to go to Redway, and a slide came in, and I remember it was either Director Ford or whoever was in charge of roads saying, you creative people, stop using workarounds. You're tearing up our county roads. We can't have all of this traffic on the roads that aren't designed for this traffic. This is something I will, as you know, I tend to scream and holler. And this, where I lost it was that chart that showed my 2004 Subaru, the same size as the truck that can't make it through Richardson's Grove. Give me a break. Thank you.
Thank you, commenter. Anybody else here in the audience today that would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for any final comments, questions, or motions. Yes, Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So currently, if you live off-road and you don't want to run red diesel, you can do a tax exemption. And that could be something to look into. Lots of ranchers, so they can use both, off-road, on-road, just do the exemption later in the year. And then secondly, there was a lot of conversations around the freight and that kind of thing. Currently, trucks over certain weights or certain axles have to pay a fee, a usage fee, because they are heavier on the road surface. So keeping that in consideration, that not only do those trucks pay the tax at the pump, they also have to pay a heavy tax fee for their part in what they do on the road surface. So I'm wondering, when we're doing all this investigation and how we're going to change things, I know that'll be a consideration, but what do you think that looks like with like heavy use?
Right. That's a great question. I really appreciate, the points made about the importance of trucking to our way of life. So often a lot of feedback I hear is, oh, those trucks tearing up the roadway. And there can often be a lack of acknowledgement of like, well, you're the one who placed the order on Amazon to get that thing shipped to you. And also just an understanding of how those fees on trucks get passed on. I actually have a study that I'm partnering with USC on to look at the impact of fees being passed on into the marketplace, really to try to understand where those fees hit. Do they hit, the more disadvantaged in our society, and understand those effects as well? All that's very important. And also just the recognition of everything that the trucking industry currently has to deal with, both in terms of the levels of fees they pay, diesel taxes, in addition weight fees, in addition the highway user tax fee, which is a federal level, tire taxes, and then there's all the regulations on top of it. So all of those are very important considerations, and we, just as much as we want to get the input of the rural community and the tribal community to understand how this works in their day-to-day, we also want to do that with the trucking industry. We want to do that with all the stakeholder groups to understand how this might work in your day-to-day and see how we can mitigate those impacts and make it work for each of these stakeholders. So again, that's why we're trying to get people to sign up to experience it, live with it for 6 months so you can see how it works and what you like and you don't like, and give us that feedback. So very important.
Thank you for that. I'm also curious with the red diesel, the basis of that is tax exemption because it's not on road. And do you see, if we go away from the taxation at the pump, do you see a change in that criteria as well?
Potentially, and I think that's one of the unique issues that we can explore in the discussion with the rural and agricultural communities. What might change about dyed diesel? As you mentioned, there is an existing tax process that you can request those refunds. Not sure how many people are using that, or is it being used more at a business level versus an individual level, things like that. Is it approachable? Let's be honest, sometimes government systems are not the easiest thing, and so are there benefits to having something simpler? I don't know the answer to that right now. That's why I want to engage and see what people think about it so we can make it better.
Yeah, if you choose to use clear diesel on your ranch and you want to do that tax exemption, and the idea is that you drive off highway, right? On those, and you don't want to use the red diesel in your vehicle on highway, then it's just by basis of your honesty that you say, I drove so many miles, on my ranch roads or whatever throughout the year. And so it's a kind of an honor system that way. There's value to doing that so that you can have, your ranch diesel there, but not have to risk, running both.
Right.
So I'm just curious, it's a lot to work through as you probably are like, how are we going to connect all the dots here? But thank you very much for the presentation.
My pleasure. You guys have great questions. I love
Supervisor Wilson?
I'll make a motion that we accept and file this report. But also, it's, again, a criticism one could have, and I think is that it's not just about roads. And so tying it directly to just mileage it kind of extracts out the other ancillary impacts to the air quality, impacts to neighborhoods, and those sorts of things. You see where I'm getting at that? And so it's one of those things where it's like I don't want us to move away from really seeing that we have impacts on certain technologies that we use and certain ways that we transport ourselves, our families, and our communities around. And if it's just tied to just mileage, then I think we'll probably be farther away from being accountable to those impacts. And I just want to be cautious about that. But with that, I make a motion we file this report.
Second.
We have a motion from Wilson and a second for Bushnell for accepting the report. And I'll just make one final comment, and that is that it's nice that in the current system with SB1, if we have a local match, if we raise monies locally, and we're considering bringing forth a ballot initiative in the next year or so, year and a half, to raise some funds locally. And right now, when you do that, you get some match from the state. I would love to see that match increased, more leverage for us at the local roads again, because we're in desperate need of funding. And a lot of folks might very well be willing to support a local tax, in particular if it had even more leverage, right? So that's one way to get that local participation and support for the overall effort. So with that, we have a motion and a second, and we'll ask for a roll call, please.
All right, thank you, Chair Madrone. Supervisor Arroyo?
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
Supervisor Bushnell?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
And Supervisor Bohn?
Yes.
Thank you,
Right.
motion carries 5-0.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and we look forward to the outcome of the recommendations.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome. And next on the agenda, we actually have a cancellation. There's an item that will need to be pulled, and that is H3. So we will not be hearing that today. It will come back to us at a future date. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to take a quick recess until 10:35. I think that's 8 minutes, 30 seconds. And And we are back, we are live, and it turns out that because the item H3 was not pulled at the beginning of our meeting today, we do need to open up the opportunity for public comment, but we're really just going to take the public comment, and then I'm going to seek a motion to continue the item to a future agenda to be determined. So with that, I will open this up for public comment. This is the Redwood Park Conservancy MOU with the county. And let's see if we have any hands up. I do not see any in the Zoom. Not surprising because we're really not dealing with the issue. Is there any commenters here in the audience today that wanted to comment on this item? And rest assured, you have an opportunity in the future to come back and when it comes back. So seeing none, we'll go ahead and close this item, and then I'll be looking for a motion to continue.
I'll make a motion to continue.
I'll second.
Motion to continue by Bushnell and second by Arroyo. And we'll have do we have a vote tab up to see if we can do it? Yes. Does everybody have it up? Yep, yep. Let's give it Didn't work?
No.
Okay.
I'm clicking, I swear.
I believe you.
No swearing.
Okay. Roll call
So
then.
roll call, please.
Okay, Supervisor Bohn?
Sure.
Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Arroyo?
Yes.
Supervisor Bushnell?
Yes.
Thank you, motion carries 5-0.
Great, and with that, we're going to go to item H4, which is, we have a presentation, and this is on programs that are impacting or have the potential to impact a Medicare program. And so we'll go ahead and invite our presenters up. We have one in Zoom and one here in person. Are you handling the whole presentation?
Pretty much.
Pretty much, okay, great.
Thank you. Now, okay, and Oops,
There it
I
is.
need to go back. There. My name is Corinne Fragoni. I'm a retired family physician, and I'm speaking both as a physician and a Medicare beneficiary and a member of Physicians for a National Health Program and Healthcare for All, both organizations that promote Medicare, improve Medicare for all. And I want to point out that the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors did pass a resolution supporting Medicare for all in the past. So this is a continuation of the topic, because the Medicare program is now being threatened by a new program called ACO REACH. When I was a practicing physician, am I going the right direction? I had a number of patients on traditional Medicare, and it was a pleasure to work with these patients because there was no problems with insurance. There was no problems with authorizations. The patients could choose where they wanted to go, and if I made a referral, I didn't need prior authorizations. But as I mentioned before, this freedom of choice is now being threatened by a new program called ACO REACH. Let me just show a little bit about the finances that started with traditional Medicare in 1965 when Lyndon Johnson passed the Medicare Act. As you note, there is a Medicare trust fund on the left that is paid by our payroll taxes, and that money pays directly to providers and hospitals. There's no authorizations, there's no regulation. Well, there are some regulations, but much less than with other commercial insurance companies. And it's very simple. The system is very simple, and therefore there's not much administrative overhead. Well, in the Bush administration, along came a new program called Medicare Advantage. Actually, it had a lot of different names, but the newest permutation is called Medicare Advantage. And what happened with Medicare Advantage is a middleman was inserted. This was a commercial insurance company, and they changed the way that the care for seniors and, by the way, people with certain chronic disabilities, because Medicare does cover people with certain chronic disabilities, gets paid for healthcare services. This works by getting the Medicare Trust Fund to pay a certain amount per patient to the middleman, and then that middleman then sends the money off to providers and hospitals. Now, this looks a little simple, but what it really looks like is this. All the money from the Medicare Trust Fund, the card that I carry around with me proudly for being on traditional Medicare, gets diverted to various insurance companies. As you can see, these are some of the major ones, per senior that's enrolled in Medicare. And then those insurance companies send the money off to the providers and hospitals based on many prior authorizations, regulations, and other rules that make it more complicated and cost the whole system a whole lot more. Well, this tended to be very lucrative for the Medicare Advantage programs. You may have read some of the articles in various newspapers about how Medicare Advantage is draining the Medicare Trust Fund with all sorts of shenanigans, which I will not go into right now because that's not what I'm going to be talking about. I could spend a whole nother presentation on that issue. However, they are draining the Medicare Trust Fund, and unfortunately, that is affecting the solvency of this public trust that we have all paid into. So the Medicare Advantage has convinced individual seniors to sign up for Medicare Advantage programs with a lot of slick advertising, and also because premiums are less under Medicare Advantage. However, what seniors don't recognize is that it can affect their ability to get the care they need if they become really sick, and ultimately, because it affects the solvency of the Medicare Trust Fund, we may not have a Medicare Trust Fund. So that's one aspect. And at this point, 50% of seniors in this country have signed up with Medicare Advantage. So there's 50%, I'm one of them, who has not. And because it's such a lucrative business to gouge Medicare, along comes a series of private investors, private equity commercial insurance companies, Wall Street investors, and they go, 50% of seniors haven't signed up. We can try to get them to sign up with us and make a whole lot more money than even Medicare Advantage. So they call themselves, it was called direct contracting entities. That name was changed to ACO REACH as of January 1st. And what is ACO REACH? Well, what happens is that this ACO REACH programs are demonstration projects that were developed under a small department in the Health and Human Services Agency that has the power to implement pilot programs that are supposed to show improved quality and decreased cost. And because they are demonstration projects, there is no congressional oversight or approval. So any type of company can invest in, I wonder why that's blank. Okay, any type of company can invest in this healthcare, as they call it, experience. So it can be any group of investors. They can have millions or billions, and they want a lot of money back. They come together, and they then flood the market. They flood the market with money where they expect a huge return on their profit. And they create a new middleman called an ACO REACH entity. And these applicants who then go to the CMMI, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation, for approval, do not need any input from Congress. So to look at the graphic a little more, there was the first one, which had the Medicare Trust Fund that paid directly to providers. Then we had the middleman, that's Medicare Advantage. That was a commercial insurance company that took the money from Medicare Trust Fund and then distributed it to providers for health care. Now we have this new program called ACO REACH, which stands for, by the way, Accountable Care Organization Realizing Equity and Community Health, which it doesn't. But it's a nice name. And here we have a group of investors who are literally flooding these middlemen with money and expecting a big return. And the way the middlemen then, they get the money from Medicare Trust Fund per patient that they're able to enroll, and then they distribute it to the providers. Now, if you look at why so many of these investors are investing in these ACO REACH entities, you can look at these pie charts and see that traditional Medicare only costs 2% for overhead. The rest, 98%, goes directly to patient care. You have Medicare Advantage. They get to keep 15% for overhead and profit, and the rest goes to patient care. That's 85% left. But if you have an ACO REACH entity, they are allowed to keep between 25 and 40% of the money they invest, and only 60% goes to patient care. Now, we all know how expensive healthcare is. There is no way that if a group invests in healthcare that they're able to extract 40% and still provide patient care. Very, very lucrative. If anybody has a couple of billion around, you could consider setting up an ACO REACH. So how do they make their money? Well, there's three basic ways that they make their money. They maximize the revenue from Medicare Trust Fund, and they do it in all sorts of ways. They can inflate the diagnoses of patients. So someone who is not very sick, they can turn around the diagnoses to make them more complicated and then get a significant amount of more money from the Medicare Trust Fund. They can minimize the revenue spent on patient care, and they can do it in all sorts of ways by, for instance, if a company takes over a practice, they may cut down on staff. They may make a physician see more patients. They may not answer calls right away. They may allow machinery to fall into disrepair and not repair it. And then finally, they can enroll more beneficiaries. The more that get enrolled, the more money they make. But instead of the way that Medicare Advantage does it, which is by convincing individual seniors to enroll in the Medicare Advantage program. They go to physician practices, and not usually individual physician practices, but mega physician practices that have between 20 and 200 physicians working for them. They convince the physicians to sign up with their company with the promise of less paperwork, less authorizations, and more money provided that they can help increase the profits of the company. Once that physician organization signs up, then all the seniors who are already on traditional Medicare that are being seen by those physicians get enrolled or aligned. They call it aligned. We call it assigned to that specific ACO REACH company without their consent, without their knowledge. They're all of a sudden enrolled in this company. So what happens? Well, eventually, the senior gets a letter. And I have seen these letters. I haven't gotten one, thank goodness, because ACO REACH has not yet come up to Humboldt, but there's ruminations floating around. But let's say I got a letter like this. It doesn't say I won the lottery. It doesn't say I have to pay a bill. Knowing me, I throw it in the circular file. But there are seniors who are much more careful than me. They read the letter and they go, wait a minute, I never signed up for this company. I don't want to be in this company. So they call the company up and they get a very nice voice on the end. And they say, I don't want to be in this ACO REACH program. And the voice says, well, you don't have to be. You still have traditional Medicare. So you can leave whenever you want. But what happens in a rural and an underserved area? Or even in a urban area where people still have a lot of choice of who they see? That patient, that senior, has to leave their primary care physician, because the primary care physician can only see patients who agree to remain in the ACO REACH program. Well, it's not quite like that. If a traditional senior leaves the physician practice, then that physician practice actually gets dinged by the ACO REACH company. They have to put money back into the ACO REACH company, has to pay Medicare back for a traditional senior patient to leave. It gets sort of complicated. So what happens is the senior then has a choice of either staying with their primary care physician, who they may have known for many years, who knows their ailments, who knows their health picture, and try to find another primary care physician. Now, if we're in Humboldt, it's already hard to find a physician. Some of you may have already heard many complaints from various people. So trying to find another physician would be extremely difficult in this area. So why is this so important? Why should we stop this? Well, as I pointed out, the ACO REACH companies are extracting a tremendous amount of money out of the Medicare trust fund. So the solvency of our Medicare trust fund, which is paid by our taxes, can get threatened. And then it threatens seniors' health and healthcare choices, because if they don't want to be in this company, they have to then leave and try to find another physician, which is very disruptive. And from my experience, continuity of care is very, very important for health in any individual. So the other thing that's happening is that the people who are running the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Innovation, which are the ones that approve these ACO REACH programs, as well as the administrators of Center for Medi-Cal and Medicaid and Medicare Services, which is called CMS, believe that the marketplace is the best place to control costs and to provide quality of care. And they are planning to privatize all of Medicare by 2030. They have said this very clearly. We will privatize all of Medicare. And now it says, you can read, all Medicare fee-for-service, that's what FFS says, beneficiaries will be in care relationship with accountability for quality and total cost of care by 2030. Sounds great. What it means is we're going to privatize all of Medicare. So back in 1965, Lyndon Johnson got the Medicare Act passed, and Truman is looking on very happy because he was working on universal health care coverage for everyone in the United States under his presidential reign. And since that time, we have had permutations. We still have traditional Medicare, but we also now have Medicare Advantage, and now we have this new program called ACO REACH, which is even more dangerous, which has no congressional oversight. But because it has no congressional oversight, supervisor boards, labor unions, Democratic, the Humboldt, for instance, in this county, the Humboldt Democratic Central Committee have not the Board of Supervisors, which is why I'm here, but the others have passed resolutions to request President Biden and Becerra, who's head of Health and Human Services, to terminate the ACO REACH program. It can be done because it is not approved or looked over by Congress. And there is no reason why something like traditional Medicare should be taken over by private investors to basically, essentially, eventually get rid of the Medicare Trust Fund. Because then what do we have? We don't have Medicare, and then we can't even work towards expanding Medicare for everyone. So that brings me to why I'm here. Our group is requesting that the Humboldt Board of Supervisors will endorse this resolution that then ends the ACO REACH program by petitioning President Biden to terminate the program, which he can do with a stroke of a pen, because once again, it's outside the purview of Congress. And we're going after these entities because this is one of the most insidious and nefarious corporate plans to privatize all of Medicare. And what does it mean? I mean, what's at stake if Medicare is totally privatized? It means that seniors and people with certain chronic disabilities will no longer have a role in their health care, that health care becomes a commodity, which it often is, unfortunately, right now, and not a human right, it's a privilege rather than a right. And the trust fund that we have paid for, we lose control over it. It becomes a private domain, and the corporations then control the usage. And it's basically a threat to our democracy, because when the corporate dominates the healthcare, then that concentrates enormous political power in the hands of the very few at the expense of the many. And basically, we believe Medicare is not for sale. It is not for sale. So we hope that you consider taking the next step of signing this resolution and sending your, as Humboldt County, sending your concerns about privatization of Medicare and taking a step to trying to stop it. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any clarifying questions from the board? Supervisor Bohn.
I actually called some health providers this weekend, and some of them are already part of ACOs and stuff locally.
Oh, really?
Yes.
You know more than me. Okay, this is a very
Well,
dangerous
they
trend.
are, and I mean, by 2028, I just looked it up on CMI, or CMS, they expect Medicare to be at a 2028 to 2031, a $248 billion loss. The ACO REACH that's coming through it's before we go too far, that is just a test program, right?
That's right, it's a demonstration project.
It's a demonstration project to try to do anything we can to stop that, because we expect this year, I believe, we will run at a $3.5 billion deficit by Medicare, and I think Medicare has $227 billion in their trust fund, 243 billion, I don't know, I don't write down the numbers, but I did know by the end of 2028, they'd have 97 billion is what I believe. So it's bleeding to death already, and we're getting an older population, and I am a Medicare, I carry a card also for the last 3 years, and have been following this, also knowing, getting fully aware that they're talking about cutting my Social Security benefits, cutting Medicare, and they are reaching out to do whatever they can, basically gamble. Corporations, we may have to look to business because they stay in business, and I don't know if I want to trust, the government is in charge of this, but I'm not so sure that, I support Medicare or health care for all. I don't know by shutting down this program is how we get there. It's a help. But with the way Medicare is bleeding now, I will have trouble voting on this till I actually hear from our larger providers that are in, here now, how they expect these changes in Medicare, this test program, so be it. Because if we don't run tests on everything, if we stop everything at a test, we never find out, maybe this is. Because I know the big part about this is in the test pattern where they've changed it from the old GDPH program to the ACO program, 75% of the governing board is now going to be providers, where it was 25%. That's it. So the providers.
No, they have made a couple, yes. It's
I
not 75%.
mean, this is in the last month.
Yes, this is not, it's not 75%, and what they determine as providers.
It says 75%.
Okay, what they determine as providers is, it doesn't have to be a healthcare, I mean, it has to be peripherally a healthcare provider,
Yes.
but it can be a company that provides healthcare. It can be a company that provides
Providence,
prosthetics.
Open Door,
Yes.
Mad River. Yeah,
Yes.
fully understand.
Right,
And we need those to have input to make sure they stay solvent.
right.
So, I mean, the solvency, I mean, I agree, we all need the health care, and I always laugh when I got my Medicare card. I now qualify after paying for 54 years. I get Medicare for all, or health care for all. But it cost me, with my Part Ds and my advantages and everything else, almost $600 a month, $555 a month. So I'm still paying over $6,000 a year for health care, even though I've paid in quite a bit. But this is a test program that has really switched from 25% providers to 75% providers. So the watchdog just got tougher. I mean, I know it's peripheral, or, it's companies, and it's not all, family doctors and things like that, which we don't have any left in Humboldt County, I don't believe. So, and I'm being more central related, on a national basis, I'd like to solve all our problems, but on a local basis, I need to know, I would love to have a further presentation on how our local healthcare providers plan on taking care of our seniors and everybody as we move forward. So, I mean, it was a great presentation. You scared the hell out of me, but I also have to go by what I found out and what I've looked at. And this model's been in place for 31 days, and we're expected to write a letter saying this is the worst thing that's ever happened. And I think we need to be a little more open-minded, because we do know for a fact, because the finance department of the national government says Medicare is going to be at a deficit, probably out of money by 2000. It's in the 30s, which isn't that long. So I don't know how we write a letter in opposition till we know everything. And 31 days into this program that they changed, realizing that the ACO program doesn't work, so they went to the ACO Reach. And this isn't a bandwagon for big insurance companies, and this isn't, because I know I'm getting screwed out of my $550 every month or anything like that. But I need to know more information, and it was a very good presentation from one side, but 31 days into a test program, which we agree that this is, ACO Reach is 31 days.
It's actually more than that. It's 2 years, at least 2 to 3 years. And before it was called ACO Reach, it was called Direct Contracting Entities.
Exactly.
And these direct contracting, there was so much hoopla about it. There's a certain group of physicians actually went to Washington, D.C. and started publicizing exactly what their intent was, which is to privatize all of Medicare, which means your card won't be worth anything, by the way, if Medicare gets totally privatized, taken over by private companies. So
my card won't be used to anything if they run out of money either.
Well, but they're running out of money precisely because of these privatization schemes, not because of they're the ones that are raising the prices, not because there's a myth that patients overuse services. They don't. This has been researched in this country. There's a myth that the predominant way that physicians charge for services is called fee-for-service. That lends itself to the high prices. That's been shown also not to be worth a cause of the high prices. It's the high unit prices of how much the big corporations are now starting to charge, what they can get away with. So for instance, Providence keeps consolidating. Why? Why do hospitals consolidate? So that they can negotiate for higher prices for their services with the insurance companies. Poor
Thank
little
you.
Mad River can't do that. Mad River gets paid less by the same insurance companies for the same services that Providence does.
Thank you. And so any other board members?
And by the way, if you want to know how much you'll save money under single payer, there's a wonderful calculator. I'll give you information about it. You can plug in how much you're actually paying and how much you would save under single payer. And the reason we're working on trying to stop this small little aspect of privatizing Medicare is because if it blossoms, if it gets bigger, it will be that much harder to get a universal health care system for everyone in this country.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So any other comments from board members at this time? Okay, well, yes, Supervisor Wilson?
I just wanted to note that in the staff report, we have a staff report and we have a letter. I don't see any kind of other document other than a letter, so in my...
We sent a resolution out.
You did, and I believe that was my mistake. I'll own that one there, that there was some confusion about the resolution versus the letter of support. And unfortunately, the resolution is not attached to our agenda today,
Okay.
so we're not going to be able to move on that. But I will say that the content of the letter is very similar to the content of the resolution. The one change is that at the end of the resolution, it talks about demanding, whereas in the letter of support, it talks about
Requesting.
strongly urge
Strongly urge.
versus demand.
Listen, we'll be happy
So
with that too, if it's on official.
that's the best we
you know,
can do
that's
today.
great. That is great.
And
We'll
I
take
do
that.
not doubt that you will be coming back as things continue to evolve with all of this in the future. So thank you for that clarification.
Sure, and with that, I will make a motion to support.
Let's hear from the public first. if
Okay,
we might.
sure.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
appreciate that. Okay, no other comments, questions from the board? And I know that we do have a hand up. I'm going to go to the Zoom first, and we have Patty, well, we have 2194.
Ms. Harvey was part of the presentation, was my understanding.
Okay.
So I just wanted to let you know.
And I believe that's Patty, 2194.
It-
I'm pretty sure.
She's on
Patty,
panelist as well.
go ahead. Are you 2194? No, okay, that's
No,
somebody
I'm
else.
I'm on the panel.
Okay,
I-
Patty, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, oh my gosh, excuse me. I just wanted to add my concern about the ACO REACH program goes so much further than Medicare Advantage programs, which invite seniors to join and to take part in those plans. The ACO REACH actually contracts with Medicare medical providers, with doctors and clinicians and hospitals. They contract with them, and those providers become what's called risk bearers, meaning they now have a personal stake in how the finances play out. And because of that, they become financially incentivized to hold down even legitimate costs to fulfill the demands of profit for the REACH program. For example, if somebody needs very specific specialty care by a specialty provider or a special hospital, if the doctor does not recommend that, it's unlikely that the patient will go there. And the doctor will be incentivized to keep that cost down because he is now a risk bearer, him or herself. This damages the trusting relationship that we all want with our medical providers. And one other point that I wanted to bring up is that we did send you a list of all of not all, but a limited list of insurance companies and huge corporate conglomerates which have been identified by a variety of agencies, like the U.S. Department of Justice, by state attorneys general, by the CMS Oversight Committee, by the SEC Commission, by whistleblowers themselves, as overcharging, overbilling the Medicare Trust Fund. And this is really impactful to, as what Corinne was describing as the unraveling of our publicly supported trust fund and the traditional Medicare that we've all come to depend upon. And the CMS, the federal government program, has indicated that they will possibly eliminate these bad actors that have been identified as overbilling, as employing fraudulent and means of extracting money from the trust fund. They will eliminate them from the REACH program, as if that is going to improve and save the behavior of the program. Because whenever you have a profit motive, there are going to be there will always exist an incentive for any interest to game the system and find ways around the guardrails that are put up. The problem is that REACH rests on the premise that healthcare is a commodity. It can be bought and sold on the open market. It's about taking public money that we worked for and paid into the Medicare Trust Fund and going into private hands. It must be eliminated, or we all stand to suffer accordingly.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And so at this point, we're going to go ahead and take public comment, and I'll start with those in Zoom. And I have a couple of hands up. The first one is 2194, *6 to unmute. There you go.
Yes, hello. My name is Catherine Donahue. I'm a longtime registered nurse. I'm also the Vice President of the California Alliance for Retired Americans, also known as CARA. And I'm also a representative on the CARA board for the California Nurses Association. We are a grassroots organization having over 1 million members representing seniors and those with disabilities all over the state, including here on the North Coast. CARA also has a resolution we are working to pass with the California State Legislature to support and pass such a resolution as we are asking this board to pass. To continue to move forward privatizing Medicare by allowing ACO REACH to exist and further allowing our tax-funded Medicare Trust Fund to be depleted, now by Wall Street investors and ACO REACH, this Trump-era executive directive, that's how it happened, is being supported by the current president also. So we are trying to let him know that he needs to not do that. And this will cause, of course, more deaths and more people, including seniors and those with disabilities, from being able to access needed health care, including seniors, but not just seniors. And these are due to costs they can't afford. Here in rural Humboldt County, and we are a very rural county, this will be disastrous, and there will be we already have limited options for medical services. Providence St. Joseph is our main provider and is also the owner of most of the physician practices in Humboldt County. So we have one main provider here and a few smaller other providers. So it would be easy to tap in here and just cover the whole county with ACO REACH. So those are our limited options right now that we have right now. And many people have many, many miles to travel just to even reach services. So, and also I wanted to let the board know that the local Central Labor Council here and other local legislative bodies have already passed such resolutions. So I now ask and encourage this council to add your weight by passing this resolution in support of ending the ACO REACH program. Our president could sign an executive order, just like our former president did, to initiate all of this. He could uninitiate it by an executive order, as has already been mentioned. So that's just my input, and thank you so much for allowing me the time to share.
Thank you very much. And our next person on Zoom is 1676, *6 to unmute. There you go.
Hi, this is Nancy Ihara, and I really want to thank Corinne and Patty for their very informed and wonderful presentation. For me, the ACO REACH program is pretty alarming. I just find find it outrageous that they can charge up to 40% of the money when what traditional Medicare does is does it all with a 2% overhead. I think that it's pretty scary that people can be enrolled in the program and they don't even know it, that they can be assigned primary care providers that they may not want. And that all of this is, that the private equity firms can also maximize their profits by downgrading the care that the people and denying the care that people get. I find it pretty scary that the Medicare and Medicaid Center for Innovation has announced plans to force all seniors into this program by 2030, completely privatizing Medicare. I hope that the board will approve sending the letter to Secretary Bezarra and President Biden, and I guess the resolution is not on the agenda, but hope it will come back up and that the board will approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And we do not have any other hands up in Zoom, and so we'll go to those here in the audience today. Welcome.
Thanks, This time I have notes. And my broken arm that is at the tender, is suffering under the tender mercies of Providence St. Joe, but I'm not going to go there. I was a Democrat in Texas and had lots of fun, but I thought when I got back to California, I didn't have to be involved with politics. Dumb me. I was a Democrat there. I was a Democrat here. Then I was a Bernie-crat because I wanted to vote for Bernie. Now Bernie's chairman of the Senate Health Committee, and have they pulled out the big guns? My standard joke here, I'll believe corporations are people when Texas executes one. Laughter, please. I found a major loophole in trying to get treatment for my broken arm, which is extremely painful. I bought my own sling at CVS, and the cashier helped me put it on. They didn't even offer me that at the tender at St. Joe's urgent care. All they could do was give me an appointment. The x-ray showed a break up here. So I saw the broken arm specialist. Oops, it's actually, you need to see the shoulder specialist. So I saw the arm specialist on Friday the 13th, should have known better. Now my appointment with the shoulder specialist is February 8th. In the meantime, I'm in excruciating pain. Oh, this is the loophole you can drive one of Rex's trucks through, is that because I have started the process with Providence St. Joe, I can't go to Mad River and get help. I can't go to Howard Memorial Hospital in Willett, which is out of the network, and get help because I'm locked in to Providence St. Joe and the tender mercies of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Orange. And you wonder why I'm spitting mad? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anybody else here today in the audience that would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board at this point, and this is a good time to make a motion or make comments.
All right, I'll go back to my support of the item at hand in the letter. I just really will speak briefly, which is that private Healthcare insurance is private industry waste. It is just, it provides no service. It just consumes our resources and doesn't deliver any medical care. And this is just an extension of that same system. So I support this.
On steroids.
I'll second.
We have a motion from Wilson and a second by Arroyo. Any other comments from the board? Supervisor Bohn.
I won't support it just for the basic reason I would love to heard more, and I don't want to speak for them, for the providers that we're 31 days into a test program and we're coming out in opposition to it. And I know I truly want Medicare to last for at least for another 10 or 12 years. So, and at the rate it's going, it's not going to. I don't think we can argue that fact. So I will, just for lack of information, this is, we don't have the resolution, we have the letter, and for that reason, I mean, it sounds like, you know, agreeing with President Biden, he's supporting it, and then some people aren't. So I imagine this is going to go through Congress and everything else, and I know they're waiting for our letter, but I will probably not partake in this.
Thank you. Anybody else on the board? I will say that, you know, I have no doubt that the private sector can run things more efficiently than government, but, you know, after 50 years, they certainly haven't proven their ability to do that in this realm. And, you know, I mean, I think your presentation was fantastic. I appreciate the information. It would be nice to hear from our providers, but having been through the medical system a lot in the last few years for myself and family members, I'm pretty disappointed in a lot of the ways things work, frankly speaking. And so I support this, and with that, we'll go ahead and call the vote. Roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair Madrone. We will start with you this time. Supervisor Madrone.
Yes.
Supervisor Bohn.
Yes. No, excuse me.
Supervisor Wilson.
Yes.
Supervisor Bushnell.
I want to thank you for the presentation. However, I would like more information, so I'm going to abstain.
Abstain. Okay, thank you. Supervisor Arroyo.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, they're not. Oops.
311.
Yep, hold on just a second. I went on the wrong one. Sorry about that.
311.
311.
Motion passes for support letter.
Thank you.
And again, I expect that we'll be hearing from you all again because this is an ever-evolving issue. But thank you so much for your presentation and bringing this forward.
Support.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we now have the item I-1, which is the temporary employment of retired annuitant. And is this the CAO's office, I believe?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Madrone. This is a procedural item that has to be departmental in order to comply with CalPERS requirements. Accordingly, I am asking that your board approve utilizing purchasing coordinator Jeff Glavich as a retired annuitant. He is officially retiring as of February 1. However, due to some staffing constraints, we have asked for him to hang out with us a little bit longer.
Move staff's recommendation.
Thank you.
Second.
So moved by Supervisor Bohn and seconded by Supervisor Wilson. And I will say that thank you, Jeff, for your service and continuing to be willing to work with us through this transition. Any other board members have any comments? Supervisor Bushnell.
You did ask him, right?
Yes, we did. Very good. Okay, and I'll go to the Zoom. Are there any public comments on this item? Seeing no hands up. Anybody here in the audience today that wishes to speak on this item? And again, seeing nobody coming to the podium, we'll bring it back to the board for a roll call vote, please. unless we have our,
I'm
I
going to
guess if
do
you
a
have it
roll.
up.
I'm going to, Chair
Oh.
Madrone, I'm going to do a roll call vote.
Okay.
However, my system isn't working right now, so I'm going to do it, and it's not going to show who voted.
No
the
problem.
motion, so, but we will write it down. So go ahead, Supervisor Madrone.
Yes.
Supervisor Bohn.
Yes.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson.
Yes.
Supervisor Arroyo.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Sorry,
Great.
could we call for a very short break?
Yes.
Make it very expeditious.
Yes, and thank you, Jeff. Yes, a very short break. We'll take 5 minutes, and we'll return at 11:30 to take up our final item on the agenda here today.
I'll be careful here. This next item is coming to us from Human Resources, I would imagine, because it's all the Human Resources people sitting there. This is a introduction of Workplace 2030, formerly the Great Workplace Culture Change, a comprehensive organizational development and culture change initiative which started a few years ago.
2019.
2019.
But don't spoil it. I'm going to walk.
I'm not going to say another word. I'm going to let Doc take this over and his team and give us all the benefits it's going to be for our employees.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Supervisor Bohn, for having us up here today. My name is Jeremy Clark. I'm the Organization Development and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager in Human Resources, and I have the pleasure of representing both the Office of Human Resources and Director Ohanan, who is directly behind me. And I am not alone. As you can see, I brought backup because you never know what happens in these meetings. And so I'm going to toss it to Logan and let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Logan. I'm an Economic Development Specialist under the CAO's Office in Economic Development. I'm here representing one of the affinity groups, specifically the Queer Affinity Group, and we'll talk about that a bit later.
Great. And Nikki, if you would be so kind. Thank you. All right, so already did this. Longest title in the world for me, so we won't repeat that. For the better part of the last 4 years or so, the county has been immersed in a comprehensive culture change initiative that, as Supervisor Bohn just described, it was called the Great Workplace Culture Change. And really, the goal of that was to be an employee-driven effort, really designed at helping us both analyze our current organizational culture and then identify where we would like to go through our organizational culture. And all of this was done in support of our quest to become a high-performance organization, really sort of demonstrated by leaders, managers, and all staff really working collectively toward the same goal, and helping us to realize our goal of becoming an employer of choice. This process was multi-phased, and it was very inclusive. It involved over 200 staff, had 3 phases, and then ultimately produced 5 focus teams that were responsible for making recommendations to the steering committee for initiatives that would really help us chip away at some of those factors that hinder our ability to reach our desired workplace culture and really sort of exploit those that support our transition. So what were some of the outcomes of that? Now, I'm actually not going to narrate this slide because it's too important. My hope instead is that the board and everyone out there in TV land will sort of take a moment and really read this and process this. And I would like us to do that because, again, this statement was collaboratively generated. And anyone that has done this kind of work before with over 200 people to really take all of the data analysis and really sort of distill that down into some really small statements, that's a lot of work. So this slide, along with our next one, and these are some of the commitments that the group identified. And we see a lot of these things: service excellence, communication, teamwork, inclusivity, professionalism. These items feature prominently in your board strategic framework. They should look familiar from our diversity framework. And that means that we are doing our best to really achieve alignment and that we are really working in the same direction, guided by the same values. So again, I'm going to take about 10 seconds or so to just let the board really review these and sort of digest them. And this is really important because in order for us to achieve our desired workplace culture, we've got to be comfortable holding each other accountable to these values that we espouse. That is an absolutely critical component of culture change. So what did this GWCC produce? It actually produced quite a few successful initiatives. I'm actually impressed at what we've been able to accomplish over the period of the last 12 to 18 months. And what does that really look like? Well, it's all of these things that are here. And I'm quite proud on Director Ohanen's behalf to say we've actually implemented exit interviews so we can better understand sort of the decisions that go into our staff's decisions to leave our organization. We've introduced, with the support of your board, required diversity, equity, and inclusion education that had never been done before. We've redesigned our new employee orientation, which Supervisor Bohn was at the last one and is aware that I come in during new employee orientation and really convey to our new employees our commitment to these values and our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, while I think Supervisor Bohn also lets them know that his door is always open. These activities of, and I'm going to use, for lack of a better word, I'm going to say indoctrination, sort of we allow us to catch our new staff as they onboard and come into our agency and really communicate with them before they go off to their departments what our goals are. And so if we look at all of these focus teams, these domains over on the left, diversity, equity, and inclusion, communication, teamwork, and collaboration, management, and leadership, all of these domains and progress in these domains is absolutely essential for us to achieve our desired culture. So the time has come to really transition from the great workplace culture change and shift responsibility for managing this process in-house, because traditionally it had been done and performed by our consultants that designed the Great Workplace Culture Change Initiative. And so with that, we come to Workplace 2030. But before I get into the details of that, I'd really like to just take a second and talk about culture, because it's a really, really complex construct. And I think that it is important for your board to really understand that a couple things about culture. And number one being, it is absolutely difficult to change. And so we need to be prepared and informed by that and be prepared to stay the course as we work to achieve our desired culture. Also, it takes a long time. It's not done quickly, it is not easy, and it requires commitment. But the third one, it's made and reinforced every day. And if you actually look at that graph and you see how complex the construct of culture is, because it involves practices and people, the vision, the values, and the work environment. So if I could draw your attention back to those commitments that the group generated, those touch on that. The commitments really provide the vision and values and the organizational context in which we operate. Workplace 2030 and the focus, the committees, that come out of that are really designed to get at and chip away at the people in practice and the work environment aspects of these. So again, the premise of Workplace 2030 really is future looking. Where do we want to be in the year 2030? I mean, I don't have to tell your board that right now we're living in an environment of great complexity. Employees have a little bit more leverage than they've ever had in the work environment. There is an interest in flexible work assignments. And there is this paradigm or school of thought that if we could only get back to the operations before COVID, that everything would be okay. And really, the thing about Workplace 2030 is it recognizes that we're never going back to pre-COVID. And really, the world is only going to continue to change. Our staff are going to continue to have increased demands. Our community is going to become more diverse. Our employees are going to become more diverse. And so the only way we can be successful in integrating that increased diversity is through looking at the future and really preparing our organization for that. Also, the premise is that we can drive employee engagement, right? Studies routinely and repeatedly tell us happy employees are highly engaged, and then when they bring their whole selves to work, they really can dedicate themselves more, reach their own individual potential, and help the organization reach its potential. So, what does this really look like, right? So in Workplace 2030, there's going to be 5 permanent committees, and we see them here, and we see descriptions of what they're going to do. Now, remember, through the great workplace culture change, we were able to identify from staff that these 5 domains are critical to us achieving the workplace culture that we want. And so what we're doing is we're committing to this. We are restaffing these committees, and I want to just take a second and say that the design of this initiative is such that we really want to reach out to and encourage departments that have not traditionally participated in these initiatives to really get involved and participate in these initiatives. I was having a conversation with DA Eads the other day where I expressed to DA Eads that my strong desire for DA representation on one of these committees, because I think it is through this participation that we're able to develop and drive our culture change. So a little bit about the structure, really. So we're going to start recruiting for permanent committees. Those committees are going to designate chairs. Those chairs are going to be oriented and work with me. I'm the OD/DEI manager, where we will work together monthly to sort of identify what areas they would like to see change and how those recommended changes can further support our culture. And then our steering committee, which is comprised of a lot of wonderful individuals who we'll see at the end of this, they will be responsible for really filling that executive sponsorship role and gaining support from their department head peers. If we do this right, and if we're successful, these are some of the things that we can expect. It's not guaranteed, but the research is clear, the practice is clear, that if we can create a culture to which people want to belong and they feel like they can bring their full and complete selves, we should be able to chip away at some of those retention challenges. We should be able to have an improved organizational culture, and again, our employees should be highly engaged. Who doesn't want that? So, these are just the next steps. I'm literally going to open recruitment this week, so we're going to staff the committees. There is going to be, get prepared, because for a lot of you, you receive my all-hands training day emails that everybody sort of gets. Well, get ready, because now Workplace 2030 is going to be like the new all-hands day. So get ready for that barrage of emails, because one of the things that we learned was that we can do a better job at communicating what our intentions are and really highlighting the progress that we make and the milestones that we've achieved. And so leveraging the communication brilliance of Katsi Gallardo, we have a multi-channeled communication strategy. So yeah, get ready for a lot of Workplace 2030 stuff. We'll orient the chairs. We'll update your board and department heads with any recommendations that we have. And yeah, so that's it. I mean, that's Workplace 2030 in a snapshot. I did want to take a second, though, and brag a little bit, because we were able to introduce affinity groups into our organization with great support. We were able to do it very quickly, and our staff really appreciate it. And the lawyers would really like me to make sure that I sort of share the design of this with you all. So I'm going to do that now. Affinity groups have been around for 45 years. So this idea of allowing people to come together based on shared attributes, interests, diversity dimensions, this has been happening for a long time. Affinity groups or employee resource groups are present in many California agencies, both public and private. And I wanted to assure this body that when we were researching and going through the process of introducing affinity groups, we did what we often do, which is reach out to a lot of our peer agencies, learn about their approaches, and really identify some best practices to help make our launch successful. And we also consulted internal advisors, such as County Council, the County Administrative Office, and others. So we did everything we needed to do. Now, that being said, I think it's really important to provide opportunities to put a face with staff. And as I mentioned before, I'm here with Logan Ashworth. Now, Logan is one of our most highly engaged employees, I have to say. For the good folks at ECDev, I have to say that I am not familiar with Logan's job performance, and this is no way an assessment, although I'm pretty sure you're crushing it, so don't worry about it. But what I can say is there's this construct called organization citizenship behavior, and it is a term that organization scientists like me use to describe and denote an individual that goes above and beyond. They do not just come to work, produce their widgets, and leave. They contribute, they bring them their full selves every day to work, and they look for opportunities to make a difference and an impact. And so in that vein, I'm very pleased to introduce you to Logan Ashworth, again, a highly engaged employee, so they can walk you through their affinity group and hopefully talk a little bit about how the introduction of affinity groups into the organization has enhanced their organizational experience.
Thank you. That was very, very kind. I will say I really appreciate this opportunity. The Queer Affinity Group has been almost, I would say, life-changing. Just as an employee, never having this opportunity to connect with my peers in a way that's as unique as this is a fantastic ability to have. I care a lot about this affinity group, and my background in this is that if you look at large trends in industrial organizational research, they find that GLB employees tend to have the worst mental health or living outcomes. That tends to be compounded by other things such as purple collar employees, i.e. trans employees, as well as ethnic identity employees. So with all those compounded, affinity groups posit such an interesting position for us to be able to tackle these things as a group and as a cohort, but also to bring that upwards to maybe voices with more authority than ours to hear that and who may not recognize it. I can say this is only our second meeting, but what we can also say is that through the affinity group preliminary surveying, we found that the queer affinity group was the most requested out of all applicants, and so far it's the most attended. We currently have 27 people in interest with growing numbers. We're hoping to become more aggressive in our outreach and that we will reach to people who don't necessarily have access. We have a number of employees who don't have access to emails or to intranet even to know that this is an option for them. So we're going to be more aggressive in this outreach because we believe there's probably way more than 27 people who want to participate in this, which is still an outstanding number for organizational citizenship terms. But additionally to that, we've kind of really created this meeting. Again, we've only had 2 meetings, but we've really forced this into being a unilateral decision-making group. So while I stand as chair and I have a partner who is co-chair of this, we really represent the voices of that group and their wills. So even to the fact that our naming convention for the group, our guiding principles and our rules and regulations are created by the group. For the group, we've also implemented like emotional regulation markers so people can identify, because this is also an incredibly hard topic for us employees to talk about, especially when conveying problems we may be having in the workplace. So we do a lot to ensure like emotional check-ins, but also just professionalism in its utmost. So with this, our goals with the Queer Affinity Group is to not only think about our organization and how we can create this to be an open and intersectional organization, but how we can also offer our queer employees the opportunity to develop a sense of professionalism. Like I cannot describe to you that like professionalism for a queer individual is a completely interesting field to navigate, unlike anything else. And it's taken so much time. I understand I'm young, but it's taken time and hard work to get through that. And we have staff in this Queer Affinity Group that ranges from 18 years to late career individuals. We have a whole span of employees, all of them coming with different experience. And so we really have this beautiful opportunity to connect with one another and to learn from one another, which really drives the necessity for this unilateral decision making. Now, for anyone listening who's interested and is an employee, we meet the second Friday of every month at 2:00. It is a hybrid meeting, and but if you're interested, reach out to me. My name is Logan Ashworth, and if you're looking at the screen, that's my email. But yeah, if you have any questions about the Queer Affinity Group, please feel free to reach out at any time. It's just the one meeting we've had was so impactful that I can say the amount of employees who left just feeling fulfilled and heard was immense. It was very impactful. Thank you.
So were you saying essentially that you speak for 27 people, basically?
I don't speak for 27 people, but I'm happy to help carry their voice.
That's a leader right there. That's an awesome answer. I gotta watch this video and use that. Thank you, Logan. And thank you for all that you do every day, as well as your group members. I would just say that the goal of this and the reason that we do this is to establish a feedback loop with our staff so that way they can inform us and how we can enhance their organizational experience. And I do have to say that, and not just because he's behind me, but one of the best things about working for Executive Director O'Hannon is his commitment to the employee experience. He is my third or fourth HR director. I have never seen someone so laser focused on trying to create an environment where employees feel like they can be themselves. And so that's a big hats off to Zach. And as well, I would be remiss if I did not mention CAO Hayes as well, because she's been a very ardent supporter of this. Finally, on the affinity group piece, I do want to say that I attended the Latinx affinity group meeting. We have one of those. And while I'm not at liberty to disclose the internal discussions of that group, what I can say is that the impact, the ability to sort of connect with and engage different individuals with which you share a common interest or dimension with was palpable. They were all very, very, very grateful for that opportunity. And so, again, just as we go down this road and as our organization begins to shift to accommodate increased diversity, I just want to convey to your board that it is working and it is affecting the organizational experience of staff every day. Nikki, I think I might have like one more slide, maybe two. Let's see, where we go. So this is just real quick. I want to let you know what's coming soon. Once we get the group staffed, all hands training day redesign. Honestly, we really need to take a look at how we can redesign all hands training day to support our new culture. Also, we're going to continue to analyze the policy environment. And then the diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan will be rolled out and shared with this board. And so those are just a couple things that we can expect. Again, even though I sit up here looking great in an awesome suit, I think it is important to note that I also represent a lot of people, and a lot of them are up there. And so I just want to impress upon this board and this body that we could not have made the progress that we have without the very, very, very high levels of engagement from these individuals here. And so with that being said, I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for the presentation. Very much appreciate your work, Dr. Clark and Logan, and all of the names and people that have been involved in this, from the committees all the way down to each and every one of us that work for the county. Basically, it's something that each and all of us really have to embrace. And I'll just use myself as an example here. I think that's a good way to go. You know, one of the first things is to actually become aware or made aware of the issue or the behavior that I might be exemplifying or doing that isn't appropriate or could change. You know, that's the first step, is just to even become aware, I think. And then, you know, an apology might be necessary. I made one when I made the faux pas of using a term that was inappropriate a year or two ago, and I didn't know, but it doesn't matter. I needed to do better once I became aware of it. But actually, the apology is really just kind of the first step, because then ultimately I have to really embrace the change in my behavior that is necessary. And if I just apologize and I don't embrace that change, then I don't think I'm going to change. I'll probably keep doing it, you know, over and over again. And so seeking help, you know, we all need help to be able to make the change. For me, I'll say one of the issues is that I talk a lot, and I'm not a very good listener, and I've become made aware of that over the years. I've worked hard at trying to change that, but even yesterday I was meeting with somebody, and at the end of the meeting, the person said, well, I'd like to set up another meeting, and maybe the next time you'll let me talk and not talk so much. I said, oh, Lord. And I thought about it. I said, yeah, I did talk a lot. And I've had that issue. It's ongoing. And just because I became aware of it and I've been working to change it doesn't mean I'm done. You know, it seems to me that I have a lot of work to do to keep trying to get better at that. And so I'm curious, you know, I guess my question here, in order to really help make that change and then to sustain that change, what are the help mechanisms, right? I think the affinity groups is clearly one of those ways where people can come together with a particular affinity around an issue and say, well, Madrone, this is what I've done to learn to be a better listener. Number one, when somebody's talking, don't be sitting there thinking about the next thing you're going to say, you know, or whatever. So help mechanisms. You know, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. I think the affinity groups is absolutely a piece to that. But so anyway, I'll just bear myself there in terms of, I know that's a big issue for me. And I continue, I mean, my sweetheart is great at listening to me and helping me with this, but, and my colleagues. But, you know, what are the help mechanisms? How do we sustain that change and help people be willing to even embrace the need to do that, right? I think that's at the key, because we can have all kinds of nice slides and talk about it and set up all these parameters, but how do we actually engage in supporting that change, right? So that was the question I asked.
No, and there are a lot of ways that we can help, right? I mean, one obvious one is, so let me just say this. One of the great things I love about working for Director O'Hannon, gosh, I've been giving Zach too much credit, but is he sent me to a CSAC leadership training, right? Because he wants to develop me. And while we were in that training, a wise person, maybe wise, I don't know, presented as wise, said that budgets reflect priorities of the communities that the body serves. And that really resonated with me, right? And so I don't have to manage a budget. And I understand that there are a lot of different priorities that are out there, but I feel confident in saying that as we continue going down this road, monetary support is something that'll be needed. I think in addition to that, there's some other things that we're already doing, like Zach ordered the review of organizational policies. So really looking at the policy environment and saying, is this now consistent with where we're going, and does it reflect our new values? That's one thing. While I didn't talk about it today, I am happy to announce that what you will see are opportunities for expanded education. I'm going to plug them. There's something called Learning Corners, and those are going to be events that are open to all staff. That can be a talk from an individual. That can be a panel interview. That can be a training. And then the other thing is, because we just recently introduced affinity groups, they're kind of finding their footing and finding what they're going to do, but at some point we expect them to play a role in that process. And that can be as simple as Logan leading a talk, really talking about the issues that are important to them. And so really it's this sort of multifaceted approach of sort of formalizing the priority of this with resources and then providing opportunities to support learning and encourage learning. And that approach features prominently in the Diversity Strategic Plan, which is another thing I'll be coming before your board to present. So I don't want to ruin it. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think that did. More resources, right, and ongoing. You know, there was this wonderful program here in Humboldt called Cascadia training programs that was really geared towards leaders in the community, but just about anybody really could participate if they wanted to. And I think we all know that as leaders, we set the tone, you know, and if I'm misbehaving or doing something that just isn't okay, then others wonder, well, why should I make the effort, you know, if the leaders aren't engaging and doing the hard work of changing our own behaviors and stuff. So that was a magnificent program, but I don't think they're going on anymore. And I think Supervisor Wilson knows the names of the people that used to run that. But there were a lot of amazing people that went through those programs. And it was during timber wars and other stuff, and you had the heads of Pacific Lumber Company and environmental groups doing the training and all kinds of different people. It was a wonderful thing. But I appreciate the answers that you gave. Supervisor Arroyo.
Thank you for the presentation. I have some additional comments I'll make after we take public comment, but I just, I wanted to inquire of Dr. Clark. I know he's currently chatting. Okay, just want to make sure. That I didn't want to pose my question too quickly. So I'm curious, you mentioned, so we met to talk about some of the diversity and equity and inclusion initiatives and the report that was generated by some consultants that we worked on. And, you know, you mentioned that there were some findings around communication from senior leadership and to, you know, to those who are carrying out the work. And so I wondered if you could kind of talk about what those findings were, or in broad strokes kind of say what, because I know that will play a role in the strategic plan that you're working on right now.
Yeah. Oh, okay. It's like a pop quiz because I work on a lot of stuff, and that was so last year, Supervisor Arroyo. No, I'm happy to do that. So yes, and that sort of ties into what Supervisor Madrone spoke about with management and leadership and the responsibility to model the behavior, et cetera. And if I may just connect that to the deck that we saw in Workplace 2030 and GWCC, that's why you see a whole entire permanent committee that is charged with really looking at how we can motivate management and leadership to sort of come along on this journey with us and reflect those values. Now, some of the findings of our diversity assessment that I shared, a principal finding, and there's no way to be delicate about this, was just that executive leaders have some work to do in terms of establishing trust with staff. And some of that, right, I've been doing this a while, and some of that is expected in every survey, right, because there are power dynamics, et cetera, et cetera. But this finding is replicated in almost all organization research that we do. Now, what we also found in that diversity assessment is that there is strong equity in the relationship between staff and supervisor, their immediate supervisor. And in a previous presentation that I gave to this board, I said, that is indicative of an opportunity that we have really to drive change, right? Leverage that supervisor-employee relationship to drive change. So in our plan, we see trying to formalize that supervisory leadership development to sort of push that out. So I hope that makes sense. Does that answer the question? So basically, in short, we can do a better job of developing our supervisors to better reflect the priorities of the organization, but also endow them with the skills that it takes to be successful in a 21st century organizational environment.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. It was a pleasure meeting yesterday, by the way. Yeah. And also blame Mr. Scott Adair for kind of coming up behind me.
I'm sorry. I did not mean that you were not paying attention. I just wanted to make sure I waited until you were here.
I appreciate it.
Anybody else on the board have any questions, comments? Supervisor Wilson.
Yeah, I just want to thank the staff, everybody named on this process, moving us forward. It's not in a vacuum. We do this as an organization to not just internally make things advance our workforce, but externally in how we reflect into the community. And in an ecosystems of businesses and nonprofits and other governments, they're also on similar journeys, some aspects ahead of us, some not quite as advanced. And and I just want to recognize that I know that you guys have been communicating, our staff has been communicating with other organizations as well, and really seeing where we are in all this. To just speak to sort of what it seems to be the focus today, which is in the variety of ways we're looking at this, the the affinity, organizations and focus within our own community. I just want to say I think that is really a valuable effort. I think it really helps, as Logan mentioned, something with relationship to purple collar, or really like what are culture, gender, and other normative issues we're trying to deal with and adapt and elevate and evolve in terms of what is professionalism and that dynamic of what that is. And I just want to appreciate the efforts that you all are having in terms of those conversations and really helping us just be a better organization. And so that was it. This is a great journey for me personally. I've talked about it before about this sort of that arc of getting to that place and as mentioned by Supervisor Madrone, but really as an organization. So just want to be collaborative and supportive. So thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilson.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you for the presentation, and Logan as well. I, too, find all of the information useful and helps me with growth in my personal life and as a person in an organization now, and so I really appreciate that. I really want to say that with the change from last year to this year with new initiative, I think it's so important because it shows growth in the organization as well. And I look forward to what comes this year in 2023 and how the organization grows and seeks out that definition of information more. So thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Bushnell. And if I may, this is something that we should all be proud of, right? We are, just so you know, we are absolutely leading the way in rural counties diversity work. So that is something that we should all be proud of, every single one of us. That being said, Mr. Adair was over my shoulder because he has a little surprise. So I told him I'd yield to the gentleman from ECDEV for a moment so he may answer some questions.
ECDEV, that's a new moniker, huh?
Thank you, Jeremy. Sorry to
New to me.
Sorry to jump in on this item. Thank you to Director O'Hannon for giving me just a brief opportunity here. It is challenging in government and in public sector to reward employees because we do not have some of the same mechanisms that are available in the private sector. But what we can do is take time to publicly recognize good workers. And I wanted to just take advantage of this opportunity to recognize Logan. Logan, you have been a treasure on our team. Logan has been with the county for 2 years, or going on 2 years, started as extra help, became an admin analyst, cut their teeth on Project Trellis, has probably worked with just about every cannabis operator in the county, and now obviously is doing well because was promoted recently to Economic Development Specialist. So wanted to thank our CAO for continuing to be supportive of the growth of employees. Thank HR and our CAO as well for allowing us to contribute to this important DEI program. We felt that it was a privilege to be able to loan Logan from our agency to that effort, and we'll work out the consulting fee later on that. But again, just thank you very much. Thank you for the time, and thank you, Jeremy, for letting me cut in. Thank you, Logan.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. The other thing, I just recognizing what Supervisor Madrone said, that sometimes we're not aware, and just owning our own behavior and recognizing that we made a mistake, and also for people to realize that it wasn't intentional is really important, and learning from that, because I know myself, I've heard things, or and I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that, and so just seeking the knowledge for that growth is super important, and recognizing it within yourself and within the organization. And it's okay to admit that you didn't know, and to change that, and to say, wow, I didn't know that. And I really appreciate that and the information that comes. Because I never, you sometimes don't want to trip over yourself and say, you don't say anything, well, then that's not always good either. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, our pleasure. And CAO Hayes and Director O'Hannon and I spent a lot of time actually talking about this, right? Because just not so much for you all, but for the people in TV land, so to speak, is that they as executive leaders sort of set their priorities, and really my job is to support them in sort of realizing their vision. And so as we engage in these conversations, always central, just so everyone out there knows, is how can we create an environment where it is okay to make a mistake? That is essential, because if we do not create that environment, then we might as well just stop right now, because no one has it all figured out, and there is no finish line. This is a moving target. We will be doing this work forever. And so that is important. And so we work tirelessly to really make sure that we embed that in the fabric of the DNA of the organization and every initiative that we have. And to Supervisor Madrone's point, so that's our organizational responsibility. But also there's an individual responsibility, which means that you have to be willing to consider someone else's perspective. That's it. That's it. And that's going to be the difference between how successful we are. And that came straight from Dr. Clark. So.
Supervisor Bushnell, you had another comment.
Yeah, I did actually, with what you just said. I think we sometimes, as our culture, or even our board here, we're not very tolerant. And we really go right to tattletale type things. And approaching a person about something that has offended someone is probably number one to addressing in my book. And I think that what you just said really rang home with that. We don't not always intend to offend, and we may not even be aware that we are. And so trying to communicate with someone on an individual level first, I think is so important. And when you were talking, I'm like, oh, that's just really so important. In my world anyways, I would really appreciate from anyone if I offend someone to first recognize that I did, because I don't always know, and to talk to me. And to give me the credit to try to correct that and do better behavior. And I just really, really appreciated what you said.
Thank you. Yeah. We're committed to that. So it's good to know that it landed.
Well, this is probably a good chance to follow up on that and thank all of us as board members for how we're working to try and work together. It's never easy. Some of these issues are really hot button issues. And it's not that we have to be 5-0 on everything, right? I think it's just that, like today was a good example. We didn't have a 5-0 on a couple things, but we were able to respectfully hear each other and provide some background for why we might have differed, and each of us hearing that respectfully. I firmly believe that when we operate that way, we do better business together. We hear each other better, and I hope that it resonates for the rest of our staff throughout the county in terms of, you don't have to all agree on everything, but it's the respect in that process that matters. So I want to commend all of us for trying to do that. We're never perfect, but making the effort is important. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Makes my job a lot easier as chair, I'll say. So very selfish interest there. Please, Supervisor Arroyo.
Is this question going to public comment?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because
Yes.
I had something to read into the record for someone who's not able to attend, but I'll wait till after.
Okay, let's go ahead and go to public comment then. And I don't see any hands up in Zoom. And would anybody here in the audience today like to come up and make a comment? Excellent. He's waiting in the wings.
Hi, hello everybody. Thank you so much for all of your comments and for supporting this work. I had not planned to say anything, but did just want to come up and echo all of the appreciations. And I, went to school to be able to do work like this. I work in racial equity at DHHS now, obviously, but started with the CAO's office and got to work with Great Workplace from sort of its beginnings post-COVID, or once everybody kind of regrouped, and see where it's come now. And I've been able to hear from staff what it means to them. And I think the opportunity to convene staff to identify the challenges they're facing in a safe place and do that so we can grow and really make the organization better, so that we can kind of show up, feel supported, and serve the community in a way that is more meaningful. I think it just really benefits everybody, and it has been just a really good feel-good process for me, and I just am excited to see where this is going to go. So thank you all, and thank you, Jeremy and Logan. Really excited to have you on board, so thank you all.
Thank you so much. All right, that will conclude public comment, it looks like, so we'll bring it back to the board. Supervisor Arroyo.
Thank you. I want to start by really just expressing appreciation to staff for all your hard work bringing this forward. I know it's been a huge team of people in a couple years, and consultants and staff really working hard to develop something that'll be effective to make us a higher performance organization and to really ensure that everyone's feeling included. And I see these commitments that that we're saying that we're essentially adopting through this process, that talk about respectful exchanges, treating others with dignity, and cultivating public trust. And I have a comment on this item from a member of the public that I'd like to read into the record in full, because I think it addresses something that happened recently. And so I'll just be transparent. I think we're talking around an issue up here a little bit. Something happened this last weekend with one of my colleagues, and I'm still feeling like the efforts that were made to address it don't feel very complete or holistic. And a lot of people have been reaching out to me to share their concern around this topic. So I'm just gonna go for it and say, and I think the person who made this comment expressed it better than I ever could have. And there's no better time than when we're talking about culture change and taking ownership of this effort, I think, than to bring this up and get it over with and then talk about how we as a board move on. So we're talking about living our values and, to some degree, the sense of maybe a disconnect between senior leaders and, those who are tasked with carrying out the work of the county. And, we have not only zero tolerance policies in place that we hold our staff to, but, our elected leaders have a code of conduct that we are expected and agreed to follow. And with that, I'll just read this comment. 3 nights ago, your fellow county supervisor, Rex Bohn, made a sexualized joke about a business owner in front of a packed room of more than 200 business and community leaders gathered to celebrate the region's most effective, most generous institutions. I watched her face fall even as she was surrounded by friends and admirers. I saw disgust, confusion, stunned silence among some audience members who heard the comment. A few laughed uncomfortably. This event was a triumphant and joyful return to in-person celebration for an organization also led by one of our community's most extraordinary women leaders. How can Mr. Bohn have taken this as an opportunity to demean one of the event's donors? This business owner, no one will be surprised to hear, is a woman. Her business is one of our county's leading lights. They run a great shop, are deeply generous, and are well loved and respected. They've made it through some very challenging ups and downs and continue to thrive as a major employer and taxpayer. But their success apparently doesn't protect them from casual, public, and sexist contempt. Protecting them can be our job, which is why I'm writing to you to ask that you'll read my comments into the record during tomorrow's discussion about the county's workplace culture, titled Introduction of Workplace 2030, a Comprehensive Organizational Development and Culture Change Initiative. I'm very sorry, my schedule doesn't allow me to join live. I want Mr. Bohn held to the same standard of accountability as any executive or public servant. Body humor can be fun in private amongst close friends, delivered in a way that no one is demeaned. What Mr. Bohn did, however, was a classic expression of hostile sexism. It's not funny, nor is it a small glitch. Disparaging humor is a classic strategy to delegitimize, devalue, and dehumanize a member of another group. It's a widely studied phenomenon with reams of data to back up how damaging this can be. There are currently 1.24 million women-owned employer firms in this country, and studies show over and over how many left their former firms because of discrimination in the workplace, only to encounter discrimination as entrepreneurs as well. I sometimes recommend that business owners turn to their state, city, and county electeds when they need help navigating difficult policies or situations. Is it wise to send business owners who are women and trans or non-binary to work with Mr. Bohn? Will they receive the respect they deserve? I've had a few conversations with peers about this, and we agree that the attention here needs to be not on the insulted business leader, but on the problem. One of our county's most powerful political leaders behaving in a way that dishonors himself, his constituency, including many women business owners, and the county of Humboldt. Apparently, this most recent nasty little joke is only one starting example of a pattern that simply must stop. I don't believe in throwing people out like trash because they've messed up, but I do believe in accountability. Our region is full of bright, decent men in positions of leadership. I'd like to see them speak up man to man about this. The county is committed to cultivating a workplace where everyone thrives. I'd like to see the Board of Supervisors address this unacceptable pattern of behavior with their peer. This was written by Layla Roberts, who lives in Humboldt Hill. So I will circle back around to my thoughts about this. I know it's uncomfortable, and I certainly don't want to take away from the important work that staff are doing and leading, and that we are also leading by asking you to do this and by continuing to support it. I have addressed this directly with Mr. Bohn the next day, and I'm aware that he's contacted some of the individuals involved. The statement that was made was quite egregious, and it was made at a very large public event, so I think a more comprehensive response is warranted towards prevention. And so the commenters said this, and a number of people who've reached out to me asked what we can do towards preventing this from happening again. An apology is helpful, is the first step, but recently read a great article about how to apologize effectively, and it included saying explicitly what will be different in the future. And so, you know, I do want to say that I appreciate all of my peers here for being generous, hardworking, and caring deeply about our community, and that has never been in question. And this issue is independent of other good works. So you may do great things, we all might do great things, but I think we as a board need to not put this process on our staff to kind of hold us accountable. And I think we're gonna have to wrestle in the near future with how to handle this. And, you know, I think the behavior at hand is the issue and not, you know, the person or, you know, and it, frankly, it wasn't something that was a gray area. So I'll leave it at that. And it's not, you know, this isn't my idea of something enjoyable to get up here and say. But thank you for your commitment to workplace health and safety and inclusion and success. And I believe that's critically important to our community. And I'll stand up for it. So thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments from the board?
So I make a motion to accept the presentation.
Correct?
Yep, I'm doing that.
We have a motion by Bushnell and a second by Arroyo to accept the presentation. Any additional comments? Supervisor Wilson.
I just want to thank Supervisor Arroyo for her words and comments today, and I hope that as a board we can all live up to that, because it's not comfortable. It takes bravery, and to do that. It shouldn't, but it does. We're just it's you know, as humans we're not prone to want to jump into these conversations in general, especially when they're personal. So thank you. I just want to thank you and support you.
Okay, let's go ahead and call the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair Madrone. Supervisor Wilson.
Yes.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Yep.
Supervisor Arroyo.
Yes.
Supervisor Bohn.
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and we stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.